Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the People Scrutiny Committee. I'd like to start, please, with any apologies, please, Lindsay, and then I will do a roll call.
Chairman, just to confirm, there have been no apologies.
Thank you very much. I would like now for committee members, if they could please, I'm going to call your name in alphabetical order, and if you could just introduce yourselves and your wards. Vice Chairman Councillor Mary Penfold.
Good morning, everyone. I represent the Eap ward.
Councillor Tony Coombs.
Good morning, Chairman and Committee. I represent the Verwood area.
Councillor Emma Parker.
Good morning, Chair and Committee. I'm Councillor Emma Parker and I represent the Puddletown and Lower Winterbourne wards.
Councillor Molly Rennie.
Hello, everybody. I represent Dorchester East wards.
Councillor Maria Rowe.
Good morning, everybody. I represent Coal Hill and Wimborne Minster East.
Councillor Claire Sutton.
Morning, everyone. Rodwell and Wyke ward in Weymouth.
And Councillor Jill Taylor.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Councillor Jill Taylor, Western ward in Weymouth.
And I'm the chairman, Councillor Jane Somper, and I represent the Beacon ward.
And
we have.
Sorry.
Jane, you've missed me.
You missed me.
Sorry, Councillor Mark Roberts.
Yes, good morning. I represent Chesil Bank, the coastal strip, but I will have to give my apologies.
I
read that. Business. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Stella Jones.
Represent Dorchester East.
Thank you. That's everybody. And now I am going to ask officers if they can introduce themselves again. I've got a running order here. So I'll start with Teresa Levy.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, Committee. Teresa Levy, Executive Director for Children's Services.
Mark Blackman.
Good morning, everybody. Mark Blackman, Corporate Director for Education and Learning.
Alison Montgomery. I'm not sure Alison's here, actually. But Alison is Corporate Director for Care and Protection and might be joining us later.
I don't believe she is joining us now.
She's not, okay. Claire Shields.
Good morning, Claire Shields, Corporate Director for Commission and Quality and Partnerships.
Vivian Broadhurst.
Good morning. Good morning, everybody. Vivian Broadhurst, Exec Director for Housing and Adults.
Rebecca Kirk.
Good morning, everybody. Rebecca Kirk, Corporate Director for Housing.
Jill Vickers.
Good morning, everyone. Interim Corporate Director, Adult Social Care.
Thank you. Susan Ward-Rice.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, everyone. Susan Ward-Rice, Diversity and Inclusion Officer.
Paul Iggulden, who was here earlier. He may have nipped off. He's Public Health Consultant. David Webb.
Good morning, everyone. I'm David Webb. I'm the Manager of the Youth Offending Service.
Morning. And we have Lindsay Watson.
Yes, Chairman, Lindsay Watson, Democratic Services, taking the minutes of the meeting.
And producing the meeting, Helen Whitby.
Good morning, Chairman. I'm Helen Whitby. I'm a Democratic Services Officer too.
And Lillian Broad, also producing the meeting.
Good morning, Chairman. Yes, helping produce the meeting this morning.
Thank you. We also have present with us today Councillor Andrew Parry.
Good morning, Chairman. I'm Councillor Andrew Parry. I'm the Council Harley ward, but I'm also a member for children, education and early help.
Thank you. Councillor Laura Miller.
Good morning, Chair and committee members. Councillor Laura Miller, I represent the West Purbeck ward and I'm also the Cabinet Member for Adult Social Care and Health, and my parrot's in the background, so if you get squawked at, I'm really sorry.
That's the new parrot. I believe, is Councillor Peter Wharf with us? No, I think Councillor Peter Wharf has other meetings, so was unable to join this morning. He may pop in, I think, if he's able to, but I think he'll be tied up. And is Councillor Graham Card-Jones with us?
He certainly is, Chairman. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning to you all.
Morning.
Good morning. Thank you. I hope that everyone has now been introduced. If you haven't and you're on here, if you could just put that note in the chat bar and I will introduce you. I'm not seeing anyone coming up, so we can start with the meeting. So we've done apologies and there are none. Moving on to agenda item 2, minutes for the last meeting. Have you all read that or read those, and are you happy with them?
Yes.
Yes, Chairman.
It's fine, Jane.
Yes, that's fine.
Thank you. And obviously I can't sign those yet, and as soon as I'm able to sign those, I will sign those. Just a note, Graham Card-Jones, you didn't actually state your role. If you could do that, please, that would be helpful.
I'm so sorry, Chairman. I am Graham Card-Jones, portfolio holder for Housing and Community Safety, Dorset Council.
And I see Councillor Peter Wharf is now in. Thank you. Peter, do you want to introduce yourself?
Thank you, Chairman. Can you hear me? Sorry.
Yes, we can hear you.
Councillor Peter Wharf, Deputy Leader and also portfolio holder for transformation, change and people issues.
Right. Okay. I've got Councillor Maria Rowe would like to speak.
Yes, I just got a point on the minutes of the 7th of January. We had a question about EAP transitions and what's happening. I just wondered what is happening, if there's going to be an EAP. And also we wanted clarity on the relationship between EAPs and scrutiny.
Okay. I know that a first EAP has sat chaired by Andrew Kirby, and that was last week. Is that the one you might be referring to, Maria? I think it was meant to be set up, but there's been little time.
Maybe it's been called something different. It might be the same thing. I thought it was going to be called Transitions.
It's Andrew Kirby's youth services.
Youth services. There was going to be one looking at young people transitioning into adult services, but maybe that's not going to happen now.
I think we'll have to come back to you on that.
Okay.
Officer will, actually, Theresa Levy can respond to that.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, absolutely right. The EAP in relation to the youth offer started last week, and that's looking at beyond youth clubs. It's looking at the whole piece around what kind of services we offer young people and what kind of services our communities can offer young people and how we can coordinate that better. But you're absolutely right, Councillor Rowe. There was a conversation which was separate and additional to that around something about transitions. I think the discussions that have taken place since then has been more around potentially a different focus for something in the future, more around preparation for adulthood, that kind of development of economic ability for all, work for all, rather than simply the issue about transitioning from one part of our services to another, and also thinking about the whole piece around mental health, learning disability, etc. So I think conversations are ongoing, but there hasn't yet been a kind of a starter gun for an EAP on that.
Thank you, that's helpful.
Thank you. I've also got Jill Taylor and Molly Rennie who wish to speak, and Stella Jones.
Thank you. Good morning. It's just a quick question on the minutes of the 7th of January. Under the item 33, the forward plan, there are a number of actions that I was expecting some sort of update from. I was hoping that we were going to have the registered landlords days already booked in, and I'd like an update on that. I'd like
Jill,
an update, yeah?
Jill, at the end of the meeting, we're going to be going through the forward plan, which does no longer has dates on. There's lots of recommendations on there, and that's probably the best time for us to then be looking at getting those items on that members want to see on there.
At the moment, it was asked for at the last meeting, but it's not on the forward plan, which is why I'm bringing it up now. Rather than
okay.
The other thing.
Yeah, sorry, carry on, Jill.
We asked for an update on the Ofsted report, and we also asked for an update on access to secondary schools and the problems around that, and I don't see that anywhere on the agenda. So this was the only place I could see that I could bring those items.
Thank you, Jill. Teresa, can you respond, or Mark respond to those two issues of Ofsted report that was requested and access to secondary schools? Or is that something we're going to add on to the forward plan? But they were due. Obviously, things have been very much delayed, which I think we all accept, obviously.
Is it worth a comment for me? It's Lindsay, Senior Democratic.
Yes, Lindsay, thank you.
Just to say, obviously, you were due to have a meeting in April, and there were items on that. I think a couple of those items raised were actually on for that meeting. Obviously, that meeting didn't take place, and therefore I did move them to the end of the work plan as items that do need to be re-looked at and re-put back into the work plan. So hopefully when we come to the work plan item in a moment, we should see those items are sat there, and obviously the committee can then make any comments they want, but obviously that it will be for the new committees moving forward to sort of schedule things like that in. I hope that's helpful.
Thank you. Molly, did you want to speak?
Yes, thank you very much. I'm back to Maria's point in a way as well. It's under the Blueprint for Change for Children, 7th January meeting. The bottom of page 6 and going into page 7, it talks about the council's focus on providing outreach service to support youth workers and children with needs. I think maybe the question is, are we going to speak about this later when we have the Children and Young People's Plan, or is this the list of jobs that are going to be on offer that we were shown at the EAP? Because I'm not sure where we are with the outreach youth service. Thank you. And then I have another question.
Do you want to ask that question?
It's not on the same subject.
Right, okay. Teresa?
Yes, thanks, Councillor. So the answer is yes, and both. We certainly will talk about that as part of the Children and Young People's Plan and describe further those roles that are presently now live within Post Blueprint for Change in our new model. And then we will be talking further in the EAP around what else, how much more, and how else should we deliver that sort of outreach, because there's a difference between, as you all understand, outreach targeted and detached, and there's a particular kind of style that we're looking to deliver ourselves, and a particular approach we're looking to support others delivering through the EAP. So we'll cover that further in the Children and Young People's.
Thank you very much. And the second question is again within the Blueprint for Change. It's on page 7. It's where we.
I'm calling from the office of Michael Tomlinson MP.
Hello.
Laura. Michael's asked me to give you a quick call. I'm a senior caseworker, so I would typically help him.
Could you mute Councillor Miller's microphone, please? Thank you.
Thank
you.
All right, sorry,
now?
Molly. Yes.
Oh, don't worry, it's not your fault. There was a point, and it said we were going to, in respect of domestic abuse issues, work was taking place on reinvigorating the social work process, and further work was to be undertaken in the area. and as well as a provision for a toolkit for all staff. And I wondered where we were, because, and I'm so conscious of how it's been for the last 3.5 months, 4 months. But again, under the DA, I'm so concerned about all those children and young people, again, locked in these households. And I've not seen anything about a toolkit. And if it's there, can we as a committee see it at some stage? Thank you. That's my question.
Shall I respond, Councillor Sumper? So you're absolutely right, Molly. It's in no way gone off our agenda, but it is a piece of work that we've needed others to be around and be available to work on with us. It is only helpful if this is a multi-agency approach, and increasingly, as you're aware, it's been difficult to get some multi-agency processes happening. But again, it's a key part of the Children and Young People's Plan. We also need to work with colleagues in adult services around this too, to make sure that we develop, and there are some of the pay to adopt whichever part an individual experiencing domestic abuse comes across, that they have the single response. So it's very much on the work plan. I think my staff would tell you that actually in the last few weeks we have absolutely picked up anything that we put to one side. Nothing was put down, but it may have been put to one side whilst we focused on the impact of COVID-19, and that's very strongly something that we will look to deliver before the end of autumn.
Thank you very much indeed, and that's good, because the new committee then will, because it's in the minutes now, we'll be sure that it's not lost, because none of us quite know where we'll be within the new committee structure. So thank you very much. Thanks, Chair.
That's okay, Molly. Councillor Stella Jones.
It's okay, my queries have already been raised.
Great, okay, thank you. Councillor Peter Wharf, did you want to speak?
Yes, thank you, Jane. I just wanted, somebody raised what's the opportunities for scrutiny on EAPs. I just wanted to confirm that scrutiny can scrutinise any EAP. All that we ask is that we don't get two scrutiny committees scrutinising the same EAP, and EAPs do not have any power to take decisions. They can only make recommendations which then have to be approved by Cabinet at a later stage. And I issued a note a week or so ago saying that in general anybody can attend any EAP as an observer unless there's confidential information, and that remains the case. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you for the clarification on that. I'm now going to move on to agenda item 3, declarations of interest.
Chairman, it's just Lindsay here. Can I just confirm, did we agree both sets of minutes as a correct record? There's two sets of minutes, one from the 7th of January, one from the 13th of January. Are we agreeing both of them as a correct record?
Yes, Chairman.
Unless, yes, I think that's a yes from everyone.
Okay, thank you.
And as I said, I'll sign that when I'm able to. I'll sign those. So yes, moving on to item 3, declarations of interest. Does anyone have any personal pecuniary interest they wish to declare? Councillor Mark Roberts.
Thank you, Chairman. My usual one. I am a small provider to adult social services.
Thank you very much. Anybody else? No. Okay. We'll move on now to public participation, written representations. So we have some questions that are going to be read out, and we have a response from Rebecca Kirk. So, Lindsay.
Thank you, Chairman.
Hand that over to you.
Okay, the first questions are from Karen James. There are 2 questions. The first one, why did the council not seek advice from local police when deciding to place so many problematic drug dealers, those with criminal behaviour, together? Did the council fail to understand that housing these individuals together would be a massive issue, and the police may have warned against certain individuals being housed together? The second question, why has the council not taken a proactive stance and placed a closure notice on hotels when it has shown to be the cause of major antisocial behaviour? Thank you, Chairman.
So Chairman, if you want me to respond to those questions, just forgive me, I'm working off two screens, so if I don't look at the camera, it's because I'm reading the answer off the screen, so apologies.
I do have it here, so if you get into trouble.
Okay, so in replying to this question, it is important to provide the wider context regarding the housing of rough sleepers and homeless households during the COVID-19 pandemic, as this response will be seen by wider members of the public who may not be fully aware of the situation. As part of the response to the COVID-19 pandemic, the government required councils to take urgent action to accommodate homeless people and rough sleepers, as they would have been in particular risk of COVID-19. On the 26th of March, Dorset Council, along with all other local authorities in England, were emailed by Dame Louise Casey with the heading, "Get Everyone In," asking housing teams to focus on getting every rough sleeper off an offer of somewhere where they could safely be by the weekend of the 29th of March. At the same time, the government was advising people to stay at home and told providers of holiday accommodation that they must close. The guidance was later revised in the same week, allowing exceptions for B&Bs, hotels and caravan parks to remain open if they were accommodating key workers and homeless persons. However, by this point, many smaller guest houses and hotels had closed and furloughed their staff. The council approached many businesses in Dorset asking for their support in accommodating rough sleepers, as well as an increasing number of homeless persons who in the main were in shared accommodation and being asked to leave their accommodation for a number of reasons. Only a small number of hotels were prepared to support the council in providing accommodation in a very short timescale. Each person that was placed in accommodation had a suitability assessment form completed by a housing officer that asks a number of key questions about the individual, their vulnerability and support needs. All rough sleepers who were placed had a support worker attached to them. The council has worked closely with the police and other partners such as the probation service, community safety, homelessness support charities, Reach drug and alcohol support and the health services throughout this pandemic and shared information on all of those accommodated. On the 7th of April, the first of what continues to be a weekly meeting with all partners took place. At these meetings, intelligence is shared about specific individuals that were supported by the council through accommodation, and if specific action was required by any agency, that has been followed up. In answer to question 2, the council is aware that the antisocial behaviour caused by a small number of people accommodated in the seafront hotels experienced by local residents over recent weeks has been very upsetting and difficult. The council has worked closely with the police and probation service through its weekly meetings to identify the key perpetrators of antisocial behaviour and take the appropriate action, and has been taken a proactive stance to reduce levels of antisocial behaviour. On the 26th of March, as stated previously, Minister for Luke Hall, MP, Minister for Local Government and Homelessness, wrote to local leaders thanking us for the continued work in response to the COVID-19 crisis. He emphasised the unprecedented scale of the challenge we all faced and our joint responsibility to safeguard as many homeless people as we can from COVID-19. He wrote that our strategy must be to bring in those off the streets to protect the health and stop the wider transmission of COVID-19. For the council then to have taken steps to close the hotels or to encourage the police to use their powers would have risked making residents homeless and would have run counter to the requirement taken by taking homeless people off the streets. Instead of closure, we have, as a result of the ongoing partnership working, been able to achieve a number of key outcomes, which are as follows: the rehousing of several key ASB perpetrators outside the Weymouth area, provision of security services to the hotel, the discharging of statutory homeless duties by the council to those individuals confirmed of causing ASB and the individuals being asked to leave the premises, several arrests of public order offences and breaches of Section 35 disposal notices. A male was arrested for breach of court conditions and remanded to prison. A female arrested for breach of a criminal behaviour order was remanded to prison. A significant county line disruption for dealing drugs in the area and reports that drug availability is now low. Numerous drug possession and supply offences detected, including a male that was caught dealing drugs as a direct result of information provided to the police from local residents. 8 individuals in the last 2 weeks have been subject to community protection notices, community protection orders, and 3 individuals have pending community behaviour orders. This will restrict the movement of these individuals in particular areas. It should be noted that of the 8 key individuals of interest to the police at the present moment in time, only one is being accommodated by the council in Seafront Hotel, and a warning has been issued by the Housing Service about his behaviour in relation to his housing application. The police have advised that levels of ASB in the vicinity of the hotel have improved in the past few weeks, and levels of ASB are currently lower compared to this time last year.
Thank you, Rebecca. Lindsay?
Chairman, okay,
Next question.
Questions are from Councillor Ken Watley. Number 1, why have Dorset Council not taken any action regarding the breaches by the landlady not controlling the behaviour of her guests, i.e. noise, outside drinking, drug dealing and sexual acts? 2, is it true Dorset Council are paying to have rooms restored at the council taxpayers' expense? Thank you.
So in answer to those questions, I think I've given a detailed response in the question above, so please see above for the steps that have been taken by the council in partnership and the outcomes achieved in answer to question 1. In answer to question 2, it is unfortunate that a small number of those accommodated have caused damage to their rooms. As part of the agreement with the landlady of the hotel, the council has agreed to repair any damage caused by someone accommodated at the premises. However, where possible, the council will seek to recover the costs from the individual causing the damage.
Thank you, Rebecca. There are no further public participation questions. We're now going to move on to agenda item 5, urgent items, and there are none. So now on to agenda item 6, Children and Young People and Families Plan 2020-2023. This is going to be introduced by Councillor Andrew Parry and Claire Shields, Corporate Director for Commissioning, Quality and Partnerships, will present the report.
Thank you, Chairman. And thank you for your invitation to submit a strategic plan for children and young people before today's meeting of the People Scrutiny Committee. This is ahead of a recommendation to Cabinet and adoption by full Council before the 31st of March 2021. It is a legal requirement for Dorset Council to lodge a strategic plan for children and young people. With the current arrangements drawing to a close, the new 3-year vision will help us deliver support and intervention measures required to help with our stated aims that Dorset should be a place where children and young people thrive. The Strategic Alliance Board operates on a high-level multi-agency basis, and I'm grateful to our Deputy Leader, Councillor Ward, for agreeing to chair the board meeting. And collectively, we will be able to enable a shared culture, agreeing partnership principles with joint commissioning approaches and the adoption of a joint workforce development. Chairman, it is hoped that you will find support from the committee for the areas covered in section 10 of the report, and recognition that the implementation can be a significant benefit to our communities, families and individual child or young person. We're very happy to take questions from members, and I am seeking your approval on the 3 recommendations. I will of course defer to officers for information of a technical nature.
Thank you, Councillor Parry. Teresa, did you want to make any comments on the agenda item?
Thank you, Chair. I really just wanted to strongly recommend this plan to committee, and Claire's going to take you through the detail, of which there is much, and we will make that as available as possible over the coming months. And really we want this to be fully consulted upon, which is the piece of work that we're particularly engaging in at the moment. But I just wanted to really draw attention to the fact that this is strongly built in and around the need across the county. So we've got a really good sense of ourselves. We've got a really good sense of where our children of greatest need are and where those needs are particular to age or outcome. And we're building these objectives around that. So I'll ask Claire to take you through the various themes and streams that we have, but it's a very positive and optimistic time for us coming through COVID-19 to be beginning to be able to actually build upon a 3-year strategic plan for children, young people and families for the whole county.
Thank you, Teresa. Claire?
Good morning, everybody. Just to echo Councillor Parry and Teresa, thank you for having us this morning to be able to talk through the detail of the plan that we're in development. It is one of our responsibilities to work with our partners to promote the well-being of all children and young people in Dorset. And as Teresa has said, we've been doing a lot of work building on needs assessment, our data and information about what we already know about outcomes for our children and young people to help us prioritise what's the most important things that we can work on together. And as a partnership, we've identified a number of things where we know if we do them together, we will have better outcomes for our children and young people. So our vision, as Councillor Parry has said, is that we really want Dorset to be the best place to be a child, where communities thrive and where families can be supported to be the best that they can be. And in developing our priorities, we've had a series of workshops, we've had a range of think tanks drawing together professionals, and we're in the process of consulting with our staff and with our children and young people. And today we wanted to get some feedback from you around the priorities and making sure we're on the right track before we finalise a plan in September to be recommended to Cabinet and on to full council. So 6 themes really have emerged that are really important to us based on what we know about our children and young people. So the first of those themes is about ensuring that children have absolutely got the best start in life. We know in Dorset we need to focus on social mobility and particularly in Weymouth and Portland, but also in other areas of the county. We know that we've got more to do to ensure that children are ready to start school, despite having a huge range of early year settings that are good and outstanding. We've got more to do to get to the people that need us most so that they are school ready. And also we really need to think about how we improve the join up of our services between maternity services, health visits and children's services to ensure that children are able to be looked after in their home. So that best start in life will be the theme that takes together all of that work and thinks about how can we do this together and how can we get things right for our children and young people. So that's the first of our themes. The second of our themes is around delivering our services locally. And as you will have already seen, we've started that through our Blueprint for Change development of our new model in children's services, but also this is about building on it and taking it further. So this is about how do we work collectively to give the best possible outcomes for our children and young people. And as Councillor Rennie mentioned already, we've got work to do around how we join up our responses to domestic abuse. We're looking for opportunities here to integrate our services together. And we're also thinking about how we can build on community engagement and take the learning from COVID around assets that are already in communities and think about how we can do that together. So delivering locally is about strengthening our whole system. It's about how we work together to embed the new model for children's services and how we get the most about partnership integration. Our third aim is around young and thriving, and this theme is really around how do we prepare our young people to be the best possible adults that they can be and get the most out of life going forward. I think we know there are some poor outcomes for children who enter care late, so we want to think about how can we work together to ensure that our young people are able to stay in their family homes, but also how can we improve our work around county lines and child exploitation. And in this theme we will think about what is our youth work offer and delivery. So we know that communities do a huge range of universal youth work, which is really valuable to our communities, and what's the council's role in targeted and detached youth work addressing antisocial behaviour, child exploitation, and also supporting others that want to do youth work. So we'll pick that up within our young and thriving theme. The fourth theme is around good care provision. Good care provision for us is about ensuring that our children can stay in family-based care, but locally. We have too many children that have to go outside of Dorset to receive their care. So you will have already seen some of the work that we're doing around increasing the range of residential provision in Dorset, but also increasing our foster care provision and ensuring that we have enough good quality housing for our care leavers, and ensuring that our partners are able to be the best corporate parents they can be, as well as the council. The fifth theme we've got is around ensuring that we have good education for all of our children and young people. So this is around ensuring that our schools are the best that they can be, but also that we look to improve the educational attainment of our most vulnerable children and embed the work that we've started around improving our offer around special educational needs and disabilities. In this theme, we will improve our partnership with schools. We've made huge progress during COVID-19, strong partnerships there to build upon. And we will also think about how we can ensure that our schools are as inclusive they can be, so children remain educated in their local schools. The final theme is about how we will work together as a partnership. So building on a shared culture and approach that really puts families at the heart of everything that we do, and some practical tools. So making the best use of the resources that we have together through a joint commissioning strategy and also a joint workforce development plan. So those are the 6 themes that the plan will be built upon, and today we're asking for your feedback on those themes, things we need to think about, and hoping that you will support us as we move forward for a recommendation in September to Cabinet and then on to full council. Thank you. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Claire. I have Claire, Councillor Sutton, who wishes to speak.
Thank you, Jane. Well, the first thing to say is I'm just so impressed with our leadership in this department. I mean, Andrew, Teresa, Claire, you know, I couldn't really be more delighted. And some of the points I wanted to raise, you've actually already covered, Claire. But I'll just make them quickly. In looking at the aims, I'm looking at my other screen here. It seems to me that the key aim is to consider how best to deploy our collective resources, because as we know, however ambitious we are, we need to make, you know, some fairly hard choices with the resources that we have at our disposal. So the fact that you're, you know, talking so much about prioritisation, targeting is really, really welcome. But also early intervention, you know, clearly, because there are whole system savings to be made by prioritising early intervention. So in terms of the 6 themes, and the first one, best start in life, you know, as we all know, the first 5 years in life, you know, determines so much of where we end up in our future. So the specific question there is about how we work with postnatal health providers to target specifically the most, you know, the most vulnerable. The second one on the third theme, which is the young and thriving, this preventing family breakdown. So obviously this is where, you know, dealing with domestic abuse, mental ill health and substance misuse is obviously really critical, because presumably those are, you know, absolutely key factors in why the family breaks down. So, you know, if children are exhibiting difficult behaviours, it's obviously very often because parents are, you know, exhibiting difficult behaviours. And the third one I wanted to mention was care. And this isn't a criticism, but as I repeatedly say, Teresa, as you will know, we talk and talk and talk about recruiting more foster carers, and we've been doing that ever since I've been a councillor, and I don't feel that the picture's really changed, and I'm not blaming you for that at all. So my simple question there is, should we be considering increasing the remuneration for foster carers, because that could actually save us money in the longer term? Because, you know, we have to be realistic that whilst we need foster carers that really care about kids, you know, there's a financial element to this, and you know, the fact that as a stay-at-home mum, you could consider it as something like a career path, for example. So that's one final point while I'm here. The consulting kids, £50 art supplies shouldn't be art supplies. That's only targets, you know, a certain kind of teenagers. So that needs to be more open in future. But that's all probably quite enough. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire.
Hello. Well, I'll pick them up in turn. So the best start in life and how we're working together with partners. We're really lucky that our partners are fully engaged in this, and the Strategic Alliance has got a range of partners there. This theme's actually been led by our partners in public health and Dorset Healthcare to ensure that we absolutely have that full integration. They're fully on board and we get those pathways in place, and that will be a big piece of the work going forward. So we're really pleased that there's full engagement there, and we're confident that we will be able to work together to identify those who need us earlier at an earlier stage and use our collective resources to work out who's the right person to work there. So absolutely on the plan and the work plan, and we have the right people around the table to do that. On the second point about preventing family breakdown, absolutely. That theme is very much about thinking about how can we support families that are at the edge of care to do better, and including supporting those parents. So some of that will be about embedding our new model of edge of care services, which has family coaches in it, talking to families about how can they prevent some of that family breakdown, how can they access support and get to other places, but also through the development of an approach that's called No Wrong Door in North Yorkshire, but that will be called something else here. But that is around how do you get all the partners around the table providing the right types of support, both to the young people themselves and to the families beyond. So we will move that together. In terms of and care, we are doing some work around foster care. We had a review of fees and allowances and benchmarked those some time ago. We will always be looking at a range of different opportunities and also conversations with foster carers. We know that our foster carers are the best advocates for recruiting other foster carers, and we know that we hadn't been making as much use of those as we could have been. So we've got some plans in place around how we can do some of that, but we will always be reviewing what that looks like and the best way of going forward for that. And yeah, a different range of ways of ensuring young people can participate. We're already thinking about that. We've had some feedback, so we're doing some different things in the next couple of weeks. So thank you.
Thank you, Claire. Thanks.
Maria, Councillor Rowe.
Yes, thank you. I agree with Councillor Sutton on the excellent leadership. And also, I think the priorities are really excellent as well. But it's still in development, and I've just got a simple question really, is whether the final plan will come back to scrutiny so that we can see some of the detail.
Shall I just answer that then, Chair?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. So what I'd really like to do is to agree a constant review of the action plan, of the delivery of the plan. So the final plan can come, but what really matters to us, I think, is that we genuinely believe as a leadership team that the strongest children's services departments are those with the strongest scrutiny. That's really not any old flannel. This is really important for us to have this as being everybody's business, and that we all endeavour to give conspicuous care to everything that we're planning to do. So we would really welcome a kind of a regular process around tracking the actions on this and the delivery of the plan. Yeah.
Councillor Rennie. Molly.
Thank you very much. Again, I want to reiterate, this is an amazing piece of work and ready for us to take forward, and excellent. But I've got just a couple of questions. I can understand the board is a strategic board. I'm not quite sure what a local alliance is. Maybe I'm just being a bit thick here, and others might say, oh, Molly, that's really easy. So I wanted to know, because it says a membership of a local alliance, and that might actually answer where I'm really coming from, because I wanted to know where are the partners here who are the non-commissioned services. This whole system approach, I think, is excellent, and I know we have this within domestic abuse, but it is all too easy to forget about the non-commissioned services and the hard to reach groups. When you're trying to take a consultation forward and get some people in the room together, the commission people are really easy to contact, and they're usually all talking to each other anyway. But these charitable groups, the other people who get their funding elsewhere, they are just as important and as important partners, and I don't see them mentioned anywhere there. And I'm always complaining about this to Andy Frost as well. Where are they? Why didn't you ask them? And Jill will be clapping, because with the Community Safety Board, that was our scrutiny with there. Where are the hard to reach, the non-commissioned groups? So that's, I think, really my question there, because the working together and all the words, it's all there within it. And I'm pleased that we're going to be continually doing scrutiny of this, and that will be a good way of picking up that this is actually happening. And through our other forums, being able to ask, were you contacted about this? Have you been able to play a part? Because Claire is so right. Without that support being there from prior to people being a family, the broken families will not stand a chance. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Councillor Rennie.
Thank you.
Thanks. I'm happy to take that question and respond.
Thank you, Claire.
Yeah. So the local alliance groups, just to give you a bit of background, local alliance groups are based upon each of our localities. There are a range of locality groups who are created to be able to implement the priorities from the Children and Young People's Plan at a local level. So we know that each area has some different needs and different emerging needs. So those local alliance group have a range of different people from local communities around the table, including commissioned and non-commissioned services, schools, others around that. So their role really is to implement what the big plan is, and also to identify and emerging priorities in a local area that they might want to focus on. Primarily, they've been focusing on early help and system partnership, and they will have a bigger role going forward. The second bit around who's been involved, there have been a range of people involved, including commissioned and non-commissioned services. So membership of the Strategic Alliance, there's a place there for the voluntary and community sector, which at the moment is provided and represented by the Dorset Forum, Children and Young People's Forum, 0 to 19. So that is a range of providers that are commissioned and a range of voluntary sector people that aren't commissioned by the council who come together to have a voice. So there's 2 places around the table for them. But we are always interested in having conversations with as many people as possible. So if there are people that we've missed, please let us know, and we will make sure that they are able to have a voice. But we will review the membership of those local alliance groups and make sure that people have the right voice going forward. And that will be the role of the heads of each of those locality areas, to make sure they're engaging with the right people on the ground. Hope that answers your question.
Thank you. Could I just come back just on one point? Thank you. And yes, that is helpful. And I do understand those groups, but I have to say, going back to what I know and their involvement, this is why people come to our DA forum, because they say they're not getting their voice heard anywhere, because they are, in the main, they are the non-commissioned services, and they're not in the 0 to 19 groups, they're not in these alliances, they're not involved with the schools. I think there is some work to be done with these on the ground, face-to-face, cold-face working people who actually can tell it as there is, because they're not having any money whatsoever from the local council. Not that that makes them critical of the council, but they're working there with all those other organisations within the council already, but they're not sitting round the table with them. Not recognised, probably, is the word I'm saying. Thank you.
That's a very good point, Molly. Thank you. Claire, do you want to come back on that?
Yeah, and I think Teresa would like to speak as well. So I think, yeah, absolutely, committed to involving people as we can. Those forums are open and not controlled by the council. So we're really happy to encourage some more engagement and connection, and think through how we can do that better. But I'll pass over to Teresa, who wants to speak.
Thanks, Claire, and thanks as always, Molly. This for us is the constant head scratching moment we have. And what we know is that it's really hard for any organised body to corral all of those voluntary sector services into one compact. We know how hard that is. We do continue to ask our voluntary sector forum to do that, and we continue to ask them to do that by us attending and also doing lots of information, which we've already done around this plan so far. But we absolutely appreciate that anything that we pull together at a kind of county level misses that micro piece. So we are looking at micro communities, not just geographic, but also we understand that communities are communities of need, communities of age, communities of peoples, and really wanting to think about those most disadvantaged, those most excluded from society, in terms of making sure that we're seeing them. But none of us think we're there yet, but we do continually scratch our heads and try to think more and more about how we do that. So yeah, that conversation is a really welcome one.
Thank you.
Councillor Parry, did you want to speak?
Thank you, Chair. Only very, very briefly, and my thanks to the councillors who have said such kind words about the leadership of Children's Services, and I echo that, my thanks and gratitude to the directors who are here today. In respect of the point Molly raised about the local alliance groups, and I speak as somebody who formerly chaired one for a 3-year period over here in East Dorset, they really do bring together around the table those on the ground intel that's so important, particularly around some of the safeguarding measures that we need to embed on a very, very local level. You know, those are confidential and private conversations between our partners in the alliance sector, but they are incredibly important, and I would want to encourage all councillors to be aware of their local alliance group and see how they can be engaged in it and support it. If I could just make that point, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Parry. Councillor Tony Coombs.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I have got quite a few bits to say, so I apologise in advance, and I'll also echo everyone else's thanks to the senior leadership team in Children's Services for the work that they're doing. So we've had a children's plan since 2005, and every time we have a new one published, it's almost as though we're starting from square one about, you know, the amount that needs to be done. And some of the recurring themes have been recurring since the very inception. So if I pick on one example, good education for all, how do we hold our schools to account? You know, government policy over the last 15 years has weakened and removed the council's influence, shall we say, over schools with the march of academisation, which many people know I've never supported. But one of the inherent problems with the Strategic Alliance or the Children's Trust or whatever form it was in the past is, how do we actually hold our partners to account? It's very easy to sit around a table and agree, you know, a good plan like this, but it's about the outcomes and how do we know and ensure that we get the good outcomes for our young people. So that's sort of a general comment. While I'm talking about the Strategic Alliance, I've noticed that the membership is now 22 members, which makes it a very large and unwieldy committee. Although I would say that I'm very, very pleased to see the Dorset and Wiltshire Fire and Rescue Service back in the room. When the Children's Trust first started, we had a very, very good officer who's sadly no longer with us, Lindsay Holt, as she was then, who made an incredible difference in working with us for the young people. And indeed, the Fire and Rescue Service have some incredible schemes, sparks and so on, that they do with young people that have a lot of difficulties, and the work that they do really helps to bring them round. But I was also interested to see that the police now have 3 representations. Excuse me a moment. Sorry, four-legged friend appearing. Well, the police have 3 representatives on the Strategic Alliance, which seems quite heavy when you look at the representation from other partners. Sorry, I do have do officers want to respond to what I've said already, and then I'll just make 1 or 2 other comments after that, if that's all right, Chairman?
Yes, thank you, Tony.
Thank you, Tony. I'll just start with how we will work together collectively really to improve outcomes. And I think, yeah, we've had plans for a while, and we have delivered together, and we have seen progress being made over the years. I think for this plan, we know that it's based on strong evidence of what we know is happening in the here and now, based on needs of our children and young people. There's great leadership at the moment across all the partnership. It's a good time for us working together. The leadership has settled across the board, and we know that everyone's really strongly committed to it. So it's been a strong partnership development piece of work that we know we will be able to deliver. Alongside the action plan, we will have a set of measures that we will be able to talk to each other about and make sure that we're having the impact that we should be having as we move forward. And I think there's a maturity in the partnership where we can have honest conversations about being able to hold each other account. And that takes time over years for a partnership to get to that level of strength and the good leadership that we need to move it forward. In terms of our relationship with schools and good education for all, I know that Mark will probably want to speak to this as well, but what I would like to say first is that we have seen a big, strong improvement in our relationship with schools, whether or not they're academies, whether or not they're maintained, whether or not they're free. We have moved forward in a way that we're having conversations about the children that need us most, what's important for Dorset. And again, there's a level of maturity in that partnership where everybody knows they need to work together, both geographically and by phase, to improve outcomes for our children and young people. But I know Mark might want to speak, so I'll just pass over to Mark for a sec.
Good morning, thank you. I just wanted really to echo that point that Claire's made, which is we have managed, particularly over the last 4 or 5 months of the COVID era, to build a really significant, strong relationship with our schools in a way that we weren't in that position previously. So there is a shared understanding now about who are the children we're working with. There's a shared understanding of the fact that as a corporate parent, all of the children of Dorset are our children, and that we are working together to better outcomes for all. So it's built a stronger structure in the sense that underpinning relationship now with schools doesn't take account of what type of school you are or what kind of position you're in. It doesn't take account of status, if you like. It looks at the number of children, the needs of the children, the variety and complexity of the children that are in that particular organisation, and says that we need to work together as a system to address those needs. So through the COVID era, we've tracked around about 5,500 children in collaboration with our schools to make sure that everybody is in a position where we're all working together for the same ends. And I think that's put us in a good place to be able to address the differences in school performance that we've seen in the past, because we're growing a much more supportive and genuinely open culture where the things that were hidden before perhaps are able to come to the surface in a much clearer way, and colleagues around the county, head teachers in particular, are really keen to work with us and to support us as we support them in a mutual trust relationship.
Thank you, Mark. Tony, did you want to come back?
Yes, I did. Thank you. I'm very pleased to see that the partnerships have matured. Maybe it's taken too long, but that's good news. But there are still gaps, and I'll just give you for instance, not mentioning any names, of a young woman who is a user and is pregnant, being supported. Sadly, despite assurances that while she's pregnant that she had not been partaking of her jug of choice, information that she had in fact still been using was not shared by health colleagues to other partners involved, including social services. I have to say, although it's Dorset, it's shall I say, a neighbour authority, but the example is about data sharing and the importance, particularly of health, where we have got local authority services involved, that critical information such as drug usage, because of the impact on the unborn baby, is absolutely vital, that it needs to be shared and must be shared. I mean, I've always believed and led to believe that safeguarding trumps everything with data sharing. So that was just an example of why it's so important that we must work better with our partners, particularly health. I also like the bit about employment opportunities and hope that that will include the apprenticeships, which we've done quite a bit of work on over the years, particularly not just us, but with our partners. And then finally, just on the plan itself, the language is lovely, but I do think that when we go out to external audiences, that we may need something that's a little bit more acceptable and easier to read, because it is very much officer speak, although very well written, I must say. And my last comment is about the financial implications. Obviously, nothing is defined at the moment. However, given the situation that we're in with COVID-19, as well as all the existing pressures on budgets, what is the strategy to deliver the plan in these particularly extra constrained times? And a very final comment is I support the earlier comments made about monitoring progress through scrutiny. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Coombs. I see, Teresa, did you want to speak?
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, I did really. I'm mildly relieved that the case you reference isn't for Dorset Council, Tony. Otherwise, I would have been asking you to escalate that to us. Not because, you know, anything other than just a kind of constant reminder to colleagues, really, if there are any cases that you're concerned about, escalation isn't seen as a weakness or a failure for us. It's seen as an absolutely crucial part of our ongoing culture. It's about what we know we can respond to and give, as I say, that conspicuous care and attention to. Those relationships with our health colleagues are absolutely critical at this time, and there have been some challenges during the time of COVID. The central government guidance wasn't the same to all safeguarding partners, and that's going to be some of the learning post-COVID in terms of what the expectations were for a range of professionals in the safeguarding network. And what we know, what we absolutely know, is that we're only as good as all of our partnership work around safeguarding. If we're left to do it on ourselves, on our own as children's services, it's not safe. We need our police colleagues, we need our schools, we need our health colleagues to all be stood up, working around the children and the families in that safeguarding partnership. And COVID has put that partnership under great pressure, and it has been a real challenge. But more importantly, the over 100,000 babies that have been born during the time of lockdown have also been under incredible pressure. And I am concerned, and I am seeing those concerns coming to fruition, that a number of families that would previously have coped perfectly well if grandma or granddad or auntie or uncle or somebody had been able to join in and help, and if maybe the level of the same home visiting was happening in terms of voluntary organisations or health organisations, we have begun to see, not only locally but nationally, some really poor outcomes for very vulnerable babies who are only vulnerable now. They weren't in families or wouldn't have been in families who would have been vulnerable previously. So I just wanted to assure you that that is getting some really particular attention from us and our partners because of those concerns, and we're really looking to reach out to those families who, some of them may have spent a huge part of their pregnancy in lockdown, a huge part of their pregnancy not in a space where they were able to be excited and joyful and looking forward to the birth of their new baby, and then the reality is that they're really struggling with all that intensive support and care to a newborn. So we're very mindful around that, and yes, you're right, Tony, sharing information is absolutely critical to all of that. Two other final things then from me. So around schools, our challenge to schools is around the quality of teaching and learning. And I guess schools' challenge to us is around the quality of the inclusion support we can wrap around schools so that children can be present and able to receive that quality of teaching and learning. And that duality of relationship we really understand, and that's what will make the difference. We have seen over the last 8 years a steady drop off in terms of attainment and achievement in our schools locally. We were in a very good place in 2012 and we're not in a very good place today. That's also now very well understood across the whole system. So we bring that support and challenge in equal measure, and we expect to receive it too, and expect to be able to deliver that. So that's the other challenge, isn't it, around finance and funding. So every penny we spend is going to be harder to find, and we need to spend it really well. So it is, as colleagues were saying earlier, it is about early intervention. Early intervention is what is the affordable piece, and therefore can see a decline in those high-level interventions. But I have to say the system is under significant pressure. We've had another very busy weekend. This is, I think, our fourth very busy weekend, and the weeks are just as busy. But the reality is our families are under pressure, and that puts the system under pressure. And that's why I think, you know, I'm very blessed with a great leadership team and a great team of staff and a great partnership that we can approach this difficult time together. But it is going to be a challenge, and we're all very mindful of the need to do that within constrained financial terms too. Thank you.
Thank you, Teresa, for that. I now have Stella Jones, Councillor Jones.
Yes, first of all, I'd like to welcome the plan and its 6 themes, and I like especially that families are going to be at the heart of the plan. The first one, best start in life and school readiness. Are we sure that we have enough nursery and preschool places in Dorset? And can we check that they are now financially viable, because some of them have been suffering because of COVID? And secondly, are our children's centres going to be looked at again to make sure they are really used for the best they can be used to help all families and children?
Mark Blackman, did you want to speak?
Yes, thank you. We are in the process of undertaking a viability assessment with the childcare sector. Clearly, the last few months have posed huge challenges, and in our response to that, we have retained a small surplus to enable us to help. We've publicised to our early years and childcare settings that is available, and we'll continue to rate them, to look at the difficulties for them and to work with them. Sufficiency is a challenge. It's an odd thing when we hold a sufficiency duty, but we don't necessarily run the providers. But we are working that through with the system, and I know that the early years and childcare team really have close relationships, which will help that move forwards. And we would encourage any provider that is facing difficulties to come to us and talk to us before they made any drastic decisions. And I'll pass over, if I may, to Claire to talk about the children's centres in particular.
Yes. Thank you, Councillor Jones. We are having a look at our children's centre offer and making sure that where we have children's centre activities, they're provided in the right place for the right families. Some of the work that we're doing is looking at new policy framework that's coming forward around the importance of intergenerational hubs. So in Best Start in Life, you can see that that work will take place there. So we will absolutely be looking at making sure that we have hubs of support provided in the right way. Sometimes that's in a building, sometimes that's in existing community services and other places. So that will absolutely be one of the pieces of work that we will be doing.
Thank you. Can I just make a comment? Can we make sure that children are at the forefront of all policies on all committees, not just on this committee, but everything that the council does, that children are thought about at first before any decisions are made?
Thank you, Stella. Just on that point, your last point you made, if I may, looking at the membership of the board, I don't see a representation from any young people. I know that can be complicated, and I'm talking about teens in particular, and I wonder if that might be something you would consider. Obviously, you've got groups on there who communicate with those young people. And I'd also be mindful, if you did, that it's often the same young people who want to get involved, who tend to put their hands up to be involved in these sort of things. But I've just noticed that there doesn't appear to be a voice for them. There's lots of adults representing them.
Can I just say the Dorset Youth Council is wonderful, does a lot of work, and maybe the chair of Dorset Youth Council ought to be a member of the board.
Can I answer that question? Is that all right? Just to pick up on that. We have lots of conversations with our young people about how best to be represented and how they want to use their voice. So there is absolutely an open commitment and conversation with the Strategic Alliance about how they can hear the voices of children and young people in many ways. Quite often an individual, one young person on a board becomes a little bit tokenistic and really difficult for them to feel that their voice gets heard in a way that they can represent all young people. So we have ongoing conversations both with our Youth Council, with our Children in Care Council, with other groups that aren't engaged in some of our mechanisms to make sure that we're always hearing the voice, to try and get that right going forward. So having a young people sat round a board isn't always the best way to make sure that we hear all those voices, but we absolutely have a welcome space at meetings for them to come and talk about particular issues, and we use the range of information that they provide for us to be able to do the right things. And in developing our themes, quite a lot of that has come from work we have already done with our young people. So work from our young researchers, work from our young inspectors who have told us some of the biggest challenging issues that they have going forward. But we will keep that under review over time and make sure that we keep getting that right. So we'll keep checking in.
Thank you.
Thank you. Jill Taylor, Councillor Taylor.
Thank you. I think most of the points I wanted have been covered largely by Councillor Coombs, but just building on that slightly is how are we going to measure success in this? Because it's a hugely ambitious project, and I have to say, I should have said at the beginning, I think it's really good, really detailed, and I'm very much supportive of this. It's really good. But how do we actually measure success in this? That's my question. And just another comment I would like to make. I always get slightly twitchy when I see 6 priorities, because technically I think you can only have 1 priority. So how are you going to balance between your 6 themes as to what you see as being the most important of them? Thank you.
If I just take the first comment around how we will measure performance and success. Firstly, we will measure it in making sure that we're delivering what we say that we are going to deliver. But beyond that, we will take a set of outcomes and outcome measurements where we know our performance is not as good as we want it to be, and we will be tracking that over a period of time. So this is a 3-year plan, and we will be tracking some key performance indicators over the next 3 years to see what difference we're actually making. So we have got some good measures around care provision, we've got some good measures around education that are easy enough for us to be able to track, and we'll keep checking out how they're going. So we'll use a range of internal measures, partnership measures, and we'll track that over time. And then that means if we can see that something's not delivering in the way that we want, we'll be able to reshape and think about how we put our effort together. And I know that Teresa wants to come and speak probably about how we will prioritise our work.
Teresa?
Thank you, Councillor Sumter. So yeah, Councillor Taylor, I have some sympathy with that concept of really only being able to prioritise one thing, but the reality is children's services, it's an incredibly complex directorate. I'm forever saying I have the best job in the world, and I mean that, because we get to improve the life outcomes for children in the county of Dorset. I mean, what could be better than that? But those life outcomes are not for all of our children where they need to be at the moment. And so we need to prioritise, as I've said, those tiny pre-birth and babies. We need to be able to prioritise our young people. We need to prioritise education outcomes. It would be really good to be able to just focus on one thing. But, you know, we all appreciate that children and families are very 3-dimensional. And my biggest challenge, if I'm frank with you, over this period of time is to support people, keeping families, even families with real challenges, in the heart of looking after their own children. And to do that, that means we have to have good educational offers for them, we have to have good social offers, and we have to have good health offers, and we have to have really good quality social work. So we have to focus upon all of those areas at once in order to improve children's life outcomes. I guess it's about thinking of the role of a parent and then multiplying that up by many thousands of ways. So we are clear that the work plans need to be achievable. I'm not being flippant about this. Our staff are really busy, and we're really clear that their priorities. Our biggest job is to make sure that frontline staff have got an achievable job. And so we will work really hard to give them just that clarity of what they need to focus on in their particular area. And that's the work that we're really looking at landing now. But yes, as a leadership team and as a partnership, we do have to focus on all of these things. And that's why I'm blessed to have the team I have. Thank you.
Thank you. If I can just come back with a supplementary then.
Yes, Jill.
Have you actually got enough resources to deliver this? I know it's very difficult at the moment to make an estimate because of COVID and because this is a plan that hasn't been adopted yet. But where are you with resources? Are you going to be requesting more? It's such an ambitious plan that for all this to be done, I'd just be interested in your response to that, please.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Taylor. So if we had to do it on our own, no. If we engage with our communities and with our partners, if we look to change the way in which we're spending money at the moment. So the biggest pressure on my budget at the moment is on placements. We have really done a zero budget build. The Blueprint for Change has allowed me to be absolutely confident that every job role is the right job role. For now, we know that change is a constant, but the reality is we've zero budget built there, and we have been able to put more resources into the front line. But where we're still spending in places, and to an extent that I don't want to be spending, is placing children out of county in very expensive residential often placements, because we didn't have the capacity in-house and we didn't have the support services to keep those children within their families. That doesn't change overnight, as you're well aware. So my impatience to make that happen is about getting pace and grip in all of that development, but that is going to take the best part of 18 months to really turn that round. And this is a 3-year plan, so we have got to hold our nerve. It's very challenging. I'm absolutely not concerned about the numbers of children that are coming into care at the moment. They are within a managed framework, but those that are in our care are in the wrong places, and not enough of them are moving into a permanency placement quickly enough. So we've, as I've said before, in terms of the evidence base, we know ourselves really well. We know that the children that we're bringing in, we have give really good oversight to and have real confidence that they're the right ones. We need to move more through, and we need to have more at home. And as other councillors have said earlier, that's about having better resources locally. So it's complex, it's difficult. If I didn't have to be spending the money in some high-end interventions that I'd want to be spending it in, I'd be really confident we have had enough to. Yeah, and that's why we've got the plan to change that spend pattern.
Sorry, could I just ask one more question?
Yes, Jill.
Yes,
go ahead.
Just thinking about going forward this year, we've all come through a pretty tough time with COVID, but my personal view is that we could well be heading into another recession, which is going to cause horrendous problems to us in Dorset, and also the possibility of a second wave. Are you making plans for all of that, please? Which I know is slightly off-piece from what we're talking about here, but I'd be really grateful of an answer, please.
Yeah, thank you. So we're certainly making plans for potential. We have a very clear plan around if we had to do a local outbreak lockdown piece, and that includes knowing where our most vulnerable people are, knowing where our shielded communities are, and we've been blessed by Claire giving that shielded programme some really strong leadership, and that's helpful for us to know where our most vulnerable children are. We absolutely have had conversations with our school colleagues about how that might happen, and that might be managed if we had to close down a school locally. I think the chances of global lockdown, who knows, we're all in that kind of trying to estimate space. But we know that the risk assessments that we've undertaken on all of those children, both for school and for their own well-being, have served us well. And we know that we have some improved processes which we're looking to determine how much we keep and how much we blend around things like our child protection conferences have all happened on time, fully court, with reports presented to all of them. In fact, I'm spending this afternoon observing a child protection conference as part of my QA framework as executive director. That's a very easy thing for me to do this afternoon. I simply need to call into that electronic meeting and be able to kind of do that quality assurance piece. Some families have really enjoyed that, some haven't, and we need to make sure that we've got the response for both experiences. So yes, we're planning for that. Yes, we're planning for working differently if we have to again, and if we have to continue to work in this different way. We're always planning for our families who are experiencing poverty, and always thinking about how can we maximise their income, making sure that we're aware of benefits. I was just looking at the free school meal applications. The level of increase in free school meal applications is a concern. It does begin to alert us to the fact that we have an increased number of families who consider themselves to have had a changed financial situation already. But we're looking at that, we're monitoring that, and we'll very much continue to work with families in an anti-racist, anti-poverty way. That's the way in which you keep families at the heart. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Nope. Okay. Well, thank you very much for that presentation and for this report, which is hugely, it's a hugely ambitious project, and I'd like to echo all the other councillors' words on the excellent leadership in producing this piece of work. I don't have any further points to make, actually, but the committee, as always, has been very thorough, and I thank them as well for their input. I'd like to now look at the recommendations. Obviously, we're not voting on this, and I think that we have covered, considered those. I don't believe there are any further recommendations to be added, although this is evolving and it will be going through to Cabinet and full council, and will be coming back at some point to scrutiny, and will be it'll be evolving, and as Teresa mentioned very early on in the meeting, that she, unfortunately, there's been a lot more families with young babies now coming into the system, so there will be adjustments, I'm sure, as we all move through where we are now. So I'd like to support the recommendations and the proposed priorities. I think a lot of useful comments were made today, which you will all take away with you. Councillor Parry, I don't know if there's anything you want to say. No.
Thank you, Chairman. If I just may, a very, very helpful discussion and debate around the members today. I do take on board people's concerns. I think we are all very mindful that we are far from out of the woods in regard of COVID restrictions and how that is affecting people's lives, and that we've talked about the need for early interventions in stabilising families, and more than ever that is going to be of paramount importance going forward. It's very concerning, and the message we really want to get out there to people who are experiencing difficulties is please don't bury your head in the sand. If something is going wrong, please alert us. We are there to support you. We are there to help you, whether it's an early years setting or it's an individual family or whatever it happens to be. We have a team of people who can guide and help and support those who need our assistance. But thank you to the committee today for consideration of the report.
Thank you. I believe Councillor Tony Coombs, did you want to make a comment?
I actually wanted to add a recommendation, Chairman.
Right.
Given the discussion that's been had and the comments about the role of scrutiny monitoring the plan, I do think that would form a fourth recommendation, just to really lock it down moving forward, because there's nothing in there that talks about how we will then monitor the plan going forward.
Okay, we can add that in.
Chair, if I may, I'm happy to support
a return to
that we return this at a future point. maybe on an
Yes.
annual basis.
I think annual.
Great.
I'm happy with that, annual. Okay, we've got Molly seconding that. So we'll add that recommendation in. Right, okay, thank you. Thank you everyone for your input into that. Is everyone happy to move on to agenda item 7? Does anyone? Yes, we're going to move on. Then we might have a break a little bit later. Thank you very much. Can we have the, yes, you've got the agenda item up. Thank you. So we have agenda item 7, which is the approval of the Youth Justice Plan. David Webb is going to be presenting this. Councillor Parry, would you like to make an initial introduction?
Thank you again, Chairman, and thank you for the invitation to myself and David Webb to present the annual report to today's Scrutiny Committee. If I may say in a light-hearted way, I'm sure we're all indebted to David for including a glossary of the abbreviations that are often used in the reports at the back.
Absolutely.
Much appreciated as a quick ready reckoner.
Perhaps it can be a recommendation on all agenda items for the future.
The Youth Justice Service is one of our pan-Dorset services, and as the report clearly illustrates, the significance of operating effectively on a multi-agency basis. Members will be reassured that the overall rates of youth offending do remain low in the Dorset Council area. On page 5 of the report, it sets out our strategic headlines for 2021, which are summarised as the number of first-time entrants, the rate of proven reoffending, overrepresentation, resettlement, child exploitation and youth violence, and education, training and employment. Chairman, I'm very pleased that we are joined by the report author, David Webb. He is a mind of expert knowledge in this field, and I'm sure he will be invaluable in helping to answer members' questions.
Thank you very much. David.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Just a quick word of context, and then I'm happy to answer questions. The Youth Justice Plan is an annual requirement under the Crime and Disorder Act that we publish our arrangements for meeting that Act's requirement for local authorities to have a multi-agency youth offending team. So this document sets out the resourcing of the YOS, the governance, our links to strategic and operational partnerships, and then moves on to our priorities for the year, as Councillor Parry outlined. And as Councillor Parry mentioned, we work across both BCP Council and Dorset Council. Therefore, the plan covers the pan-Dorset area. It's fair to say that in the Dorset Council area, as Councillor Parry said, rates of offending are relatively low, and our first time entry is low, but that is the number of young people entering the justice system for the first time. Low, but we would like it to be lower, would be the way I would describe it. So the priorities we've set for the coming year, and not to say that we're not working on other things as well, is based on national priorities, local issues, self-assessment of our service and our areas for development. So therefore we've chosen those 5 areas: reducing first-time entrants, reducing the over-representation of BAME young people in the justice system, particularly the later stages of the justice system. Our arrangements for resettlement when children who've received a custodial sentence are released from custody. The need to continue to develop our response to child exploitation and associated youth violence, and that chimes with some work we're prioritising to implement a trauma-informed approach to our practice. And a continuing issue over the years, which Councillor Coombs alluded to, which is about education, training and employment, and the need for young people in contact with the Youth Offending Service to have support to access education and training. So those are our outline priorities. Finally, I'll just comment on the timing of the plan. This plan covers the year April to March, and I'm conscious that we are now in July. The Youth Justice Board has waived its requirement this year for a Youth Justice Plan to be submitted to the Youth Justice Board, but their timescale is normally for submissions in July. We were aiming to do this earlier, but the COVID lockdown has obviously affected our work. But I would like to reassure councillors that we are already engaged with these activities and we're not waiting for the approval process to get started.
Right. Thank you very much. Maria. Did you want to speak, Maria?
Yes,
Maria?
yes, thank you. I was just couldn't get my things to go off. Thank you for this youth justice plan. Obviously, a lot of hard work's gone into this. I've got a couple of questions, if I may. And the first one is about the equalities impact assessments. It states that they haven't been carried out, and that may well be because you do all sorts of other assessments. But given that there's an overrepresentation of Black, Asian and minority ethnic groups, can you just tell me why an equalities impact assessment hasn't been carried out? And the other question is around the education and training, the reduction of the range of education and training provision for young people with significant needs. That's a major concern, and it's around really the offer that is out there through the training providers and the colleges, and I'd like to know, you know, what is being done to address that. I appreciate that you've introduced ASDAN courses, and that's really great, but it's, you know, when the young person's order finishes, if there's nothing for them to move into, it's just crucial that that the offer is widened to support these vulnerable young people. So those are my questions.
Thank you. On the first point, the equalities impact assessment, the reason we haven't completed one is that this isn't a change of policy or a new strategy. It's obviously an important issue for us though, and we're very mindful of the rate of representation of not just BAME young people, but there are other disadvantaged groups that are overrepresented in the justice system. And a lot of our work through the YOS Partnership Board, the Youth Offending Service Partnership Board, I should say, and within the Youth Offending Service is focused on those issues. So I've noted in that part of the report also children in care can be overrepresented, and we're increasingly aware that children in the youth justice system are much more likely than other children to have speech, language and communication needs. And obviously those different issues often combine to increase the impact of disadvantage. So although we haven't done a recent equalities impact assessment, we are addressing those issues continually, and that is why they're prioritised in this plan. On the second point, on ETE, the education, training and employment, the young people that we work with tend not to be in mainstream school if they're school age. Some of them are, but most of them are in learning centres or alternative provision. And if they're post 16, then there's a range, but obviously a concerning number are not in education, employment and training, and others are in college or with other forms of alternative provision. In our team, because we're multidisciplinary, part of our rationale is that we have different specialists in the team for different areas of difficulty that young people face. So we've got an education officer who works with her colleagues in the youth offending team to identify children whose school age education is a particular concern, and brokers between them, local authorities, schools, to make sure that the right education provision is in place. Works with the young person and their family sometimes to understand what are the obstacles to them engaging with that education. And it is focused, you're right to say that our involvement is time limited by the length of the court order or the police caution. So the focus is always on what is our exit strategy, if you like. Are we handing over a more secure arrangement when we leave? Similarly, we've got a, through the contract with Ansbury, we've got a Ansbury careers advisor who works with the children we work with who are post 16. And building links with colleges, with alternative providers, and as part of that work, you referenced the work we're doing ourselves to offer ASDAN short courses, partly because young people need sometimes a quicker outcome than the prospect of at the end of this year or even 2 years you will get a qualification. They need something a bit more immediate to engage them and reinforce their motivation. So those ASDAN short courses are not a replacement for a college course, but they can assist with it or help a young person be better ready for it. We've also brought into a subscription to BKSB online maths and English assessments. One of the issues we face is that young people who've been out of education for a while, perhaps through non-attendance, and now obviously lately with the COVID-19 lockdown, particularly our year 11s, who might be wanting to apply to college and may not have been attending education regularly before March, we need to make sure we know what their maths and English levels are so that we can support them into the right provision for them. So that's why we've added that to our work. So, and again, our careers advisor and our education officer sometimes carry on working after the court order has finished. So we try to be more sensitive to the individual young person. And if there's a piece of work that isn't yet concluded, we carry on until it is concluded. Having said all that, I agree with your first point, or your earlier point, that the range of provision is a concern. And some of the young people we work with may not succeed in their first placement, and when there are fewer alternatives, that can be harder to find a new placement.
Thank you. I think I appreciate just how very difficult it is, but it's whether the local authority can look at working with training providers and colleges to increase the offer so that there is something there for them, because it's really going to be the biggest barrier to employment and increase the poor life outcomes that these young people will have. So I know it's very, very difficult and complex thing to achieve, and we're placing a lot of emphasis on early intervention, which we've talked about a lot this morning, but I don't think we can take our eye off the ball with the young people who are significantly have significant needs. But thank you very much for your answer. It's very helpful.
Can I thank you, Maria. There's a very good points. I wonder if there's going to be a piece of work around the new Kickstarter scheme, which is going to be introduced in, I believe, August or September, and how we might be able to, or the local authority might be able to assist young people with seeking out some of those Kickstarter schemes. And if you're working on that, or will be looking at that once that's introduced.
I'm not familiar with those schemes, so I may need some assistance from my local authority colleagues, but what I can say is that we are very much engaged with the Good Education for All and the other work streams that were discussed earlier under the Children and Young People's Plan. So,
Teresa, you're going to...
Thank you, Jane. Yeah, so I would absolutely want to put on the agenda, and I'll hand it over to Mark in a moment, but this is a significant area of improvement for us. To have the right range, to have the right wealth of opportunities that young people frankly can burn through, because that's what we know is that our most troubled will do, is a significant area of development for us. Now there's lots of things going on, lots of looking at more apprenticeships, lots of looking at a more variety of offer, but it's not an area of strength for us at the present time, and we need to do more. Mark, I don't know if you want to say more about that.
Yes, very happy to. Just to say that I want to signal some work that we are beginning to do, which is to look at that wider opportunity piece for those who are 16, 17, 18 and beyond, because those are the people for whom we want to do something much better. So talking about the skills agenda, how do we bring that up to our, if you like, our benchmark, which is to say we want to make a rounded offer to young people that allows them opportunity to succeed, and to recognise what Teresa said, which is that on a number of occasions they will have multiple failures before they find the thing they succeed at. And it's wrapping that support around them that we want to do. So in particular, we're beginning to focus with HE colleagues and FE colleagues on what's the offer in Dorset. What does that really really look like for young people? What's the breadth that we're able to deliver? And then to work more closely, obviously, as we've sharpened our understanding with young people as they're going through the compulsory school years, we'll be in a position where our wraparound locality services will understand those young people better, our schools will have understood them better, and we can be in a position where we are planning longer term transitional work for them as they're coming out of various phases of education, be that schools, where many are very successful, but also alternative provision and looking at the alternative options in colleges and other places. So it's a wider piece of work, and we understand the scale and the complexity of it, and I'm pleased that working with David, we're beginning to develop that longer term trajectory, which is more success for our Dorset children.
Thank you, Mark. Claire, Councillor Sutton.
Thank you, Jane. The first one's about resourcing, particularly in relation to the significant speech and language deficits, which obviously is quite heartbreaking, isn't it? You know, you see the trajectory some young people are on, and I know we don't have a commitment in the our 20 to 21 budget yet for that, and it feels to me that this comes back to us every year, and I suppose I would like to feel reassured that this isn't an optional, you know, this isn't something that can pop in and out of the budget, is absolutely essential. And on looking at that, I mean, looking at the finances, I noticed that the police contribution is less than half what it was 6 years ago, and I understand, you know, that, you know, police funds are also under significant pressure, but I wonder if this is something we could very specifically request extra help with, you know, in terms of the police contribution, and also for helping with the children of offenders, because that looks like a really significant area in terms of investing up front to generate whole system savings, you know, further down the line. So that's my first one. And the second one is, David said that we've got you know, Dorset offending rates are really low, but although our first time entrants into the system are down, we're still significantly above the southwest and national averages. So that suggests that there's something inherently wrong here. If our rates of if the rates are low but our first time entrants are high, then it sounds like we're putting too many people through the system. I don't know if someone can break that down for me. And the third one is a little bit more about the BAME proportion. We know the numbers are low, but you know, so we're talking about 50% of our custodial sentences, but I checked the numbers. Only 4.4% of our population is BAME, and we know that there are some things that you know that coalesce in terms of deprivation, etc. But this is a really hard thing to say. But we do seriously have to think about whether there's any systematic racism in the system, because the disparity is just so large. So that there is a difficult question there that does have to be raised, I'm afraid. So that's three separate areas. Thank you.
Thank you. So the first area was about resourcing. Just to explain the police contribution figures, the halving of their contribution, actually the same money is going in. It's just that some of the money that goes to the Safe Schools and Communities team used to be routed through the YOS budget and is now paid for by the OPCC directly into that team. So it isn't the reduction that it's not the reduction it appears to be. The speech and language therapy is absolutely crucial. So we initially appointed a speech and language therapist using an NHS England funding stream which I'd applied to. They started work in our team. I say they because it's a job share post. They started work in our team in March 2018. And since that time, as you're right to say, they have become absolutely fundamental to our service. The way we operate is that all young people who receive a court order or receive a second caution from the police are referred to them. Well, the speech and language therapist contacts them and undertakes an assessment. So we're not waiting to see whether our other workers think there might be speech and language issues. We're proactively assessing and we're identifying them. And often those issues have been missed in school, and it may be that the child's behaviour has been the focus for attention more so than the underlying speech, language and communication needs. And the speech and language therapist would say, just talking to a young person, they wouldn't necessarily pick up some of these issues because they've developed, if you like, masking skills. So understanding those speech and language communication needs means that we can respond to them in a much more individualised way. Families understand their child better and are really appreciative of the advice they receive from our speech and language therapist, and so do other professionals. So the challenge for me at the time of increasing pressure on resources is to make sure that that funding is continued. We've secured it for the current year and through the CCG, and we're optimistic that we will make that permanent thereafter. And it is such an integral part of our service, we've really got no choice but to find a way to carry on with that work, because it informs all the rest of the work we do now. And we've also used that resource to change the way we write to families and young people. All our documents, which we thought were young person friendly, are much more so now that we've got a specialist advising us. The second point you raised was about reoffending rate or offending rates in Dorset. So I'm sorry if I gave the impression I said they were really low. I'd say they're relatively low, the offending rates. And there is an issue which affects this question and the next one about BAME, which is the report is written, if you like, from a Pan Dorset perspective. Some of the first time entrants and reoffending and BAME issues are more of a concern in the BCP council area than they are in the Dorset council area. So the Dorset rate for first time entrants is lower than the rate in BCP council. Having said that, and our rate has come down over the last year each time it's been reported. I perhaps should have pointed out that, just to explain, on the figures on page 14 of the Youth Justice Plan, there's a spike where it appears to go down to 0. That's because the Youth Justice Board nationally didn't produce any data for that quarter. But the trend over the year is down, and we're getting closer to the regional and national averages, but their trend is down as well. And some areas have been more successful at keeping children out of the justice system. So we are working with our colleagues in the police so that when a young person commits an offence, we already often use what we call an informal outcome, which doesn't count as entering the justice system, but we're looking for more opportunities to do that. And we, at our YOS Youth Offending Service Partnership Management Board last week, we were focusing on this issue with colleagues from the police about how we can extend the ways that we do that. I don't know if you can hear the siren passing, which I'm assuming is not another young offender causing the police into rural Dorset. So the first dimensions rate, as I said, is low, but we would like it to be lower, and we are actively working on that. The issue about Black, Asian and minority ethnic overrepresentation, the figures that I quote in the report are specifically to do with custodial sentences, do relate to the BCP council area. The numbers are very low, so it's difficult to get into too much detail without getting to the point where you're starting to identify people. But the difficulty I have with, and low numbers mean that statistical conclusions have to be drawn with caution. But my concern is that nationally, in England and Wales, about 50% of the people in custody, of the under 18s in custody for criminal matters, about 50% of them are BAME, which is massively disproportionate to the rate in the general population. So presumably there's lots of areas around the country that have small individual numbers, which, like us, which are collectively adding up to that overrepresentation. So in 2017, the LAMI review was published with a into this issue with a reform or explain kind of theme to it, and identifying that there may be some systemic issues. So one of his hypotheses was that children and young people from a BAME background maybe have less trust in institutions and are less likely to admit an offence. If you don't admit an offence, you rule yourself out of receiving a caution or an out-of-court disposal. So you go straight to court, so you're entering the system at a later stage than some of your peers who might admit an offence. That means that you've got kind of fewer steps left to go before you end up in custody. So our total numbers on our caseload are not disproportionate in Dorset. What I'm trying to monitor more closely is whether they are at the latest stage of the system sooner than their white counterparts. And because we are talking about really low individual numbers, it can be quite hard to work that out, because each individual case you can understand the merits of the decision making. And the other thing I would say is that the youth offender population is a reflection of cumulative issues across society. So they arrive in teenage years having experienced disadvantage across perhaps a number of issues like engagement with education, maybe some history of family trauma. I'm not talking about BAME, I'm talking about the whole youth justice population. Speech and language needs, maybe income deprivation. So all those things combined. So for us to resolve the issue just in the justice system is quite difficult. And it does require a more systemic response that goes beyond solely the criminal justice system. But obviously we do need to be constantly alert to whether we are inadvertently perpetuating any systemic bias.
Thank you, David. Just one very quick comeback, Jane. It doesn't seem to me the data isn't telling us that our first-time entrance is low relative to how many offences are committed, actually. But I'll leave it there.
Thank you.
Can I just come in on the point that has been discussed on the numbers of BAME people coming into the system? I just want to, you mentioned the LAMI report, which I've read, and the discussions around trustworthiness, and for these young people who are in the system and the adults that they're dealing with, and the need to trust them and to be able to feel comfortable with them. I just like to ask you about our own workforce. Now, last year, I believe that there was just a small breakdown for us. And I'm just wondering if that might be something that needs to be added back into the report, so that we can see perhaps what that breakdown is, and if there's an area there. Now, I seem to remember last time that you presented to us that you said that we had extremely high levels of staff retention, which is very good in some ways because you have that continuity and expertise and understanding, but it also means that there are a few vacancies coming through, so the makeup of the workforce is difficult to change in any meaningful way. And I wonder if that part of the report should be given to Cabinet when it goes, and full council, just for them to comment. Obviously, the committee today hasn't seen that, so they can't comment on it, but I just wonder if it has any bearing.
So the information on the gender and ethnicity of our staff and volunteers was in last year's plan, and I haven't included it in this year's. I can put it in, and you're right that the same issues persist. So we have low turnover of staff, and as you say, there's some good things about that. Our staff appear happy and are doing a good job, but it does mean we don't get the opportunity to diversify our workforce so often. So at the moment, we don't have any BAME staff members in our team, and that is a concern. We do work with other organisations and try to, of course, sometimes to address that issue through mentors and other provision, but obviously we would like a more diverse workforce ourselves, should the opportunity arise. Whether we're going to be in a position to do much recruitment, given staff retention and also given resourcing pressures, I'm not sure.
No, I understand that, but I think it would be helpful for that to be in, because obviously once it's removed, and one can lose sight of that. So I think it would be helpful for Cabinet to have sight of that. Sorry, right, Molly, you wanted to speak.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm pleased because some of the things I wanted to ask come forward. The graph on page 14 made me actually think about our current times. I realised there had to be a real reason, as all three lines were down. I don't quite know how to say this. I've lost the words. Over the past 3.5 months, we have been in a huge lockdown, and these young people have been probably locked down to a certain extent even more because of parents saying no, and they've not been in education. The older ones have not been in school because they've done their exams or they're not doing their exams. And I'm wondering if we're going to do some piece of work around what's happened as we've come out of lockdown and the numbers and the crime figures. The police tell us that crime is down, but of course it's down. People haven't been out committing crime. And also, I'm not a believer that, I think we've got to a point where a lot of people are not reporting things because they are firstly worried that the police are really busy, and secondly they're not happy with the 101 system. So I think that would be something very interesting to us to look at, because these multiple failures around the 16 to 19-year-olds especially, we've heard about it all morning from families that have got various issues and problems that are going on. These young people are going to, in a way, whether they're committing crime or not, are a bit of a lost group of people, because they don't know whether to go back to school, they don't know whether to go to university, hard to get a job, no money. So Jill, I think it was, talked about the financial situation for us all. And I don't know if we're going to, and I hate to say the word, resources, have we got the resources to deal with this huge influx that I believe is going to come because of the sheer situation that we've been in? And secondly, I'm really pleased to see we do a lot of feedback from people, but I want to ask you, where's the negative feedback? You know, some people said it's boring and a waste of time doing the reparation work, but there has to be more poor feedback than those two comments, even if the feedback is being picked up informally as we go along, because we can't improve a service if we aren't getting, or we aren't taking note of, the full range of poor feedback. And again, I think this will all be part of the next year all round, because I understand Teresa's frustrations as well, because there's going to be so much to deal with our children and young people for the next year especially. That was a bit of a ramble, I'm sorry.
No, Molly, it wasn't. Teresa wants to speak, and then it'll be Councillor Coombs.
Thank you. I'm just wanting to kind of come alongside David and support these. These are really huge issues, which I'm really pleased to be hearing aired, and I think it's really important. And I guess I'm just very mindful that this conversation began around, should we be at all concerned that there might be some racism or oppressive practice in the system? We should always think there's oppressive practice in a system. A system by its very nature is almost impossible to make fair and balanced and equitable for all. So that's the approach I very strongly bring to the piece. We do, of course, have other staff within children's services who are from black and minority ethnic groups, and one of the things that I'm attempting to commit to is to not use the acronym BAME. It's an acronym that distills beyond anything meaningful the experience for black people. So we do have those colleagues, and we have actively recruited others. However, I think this is white people's business too, and I'm absolutely challenging all of our staff and our partners and ourselves to make sure that we all step up to that plate, to name it every day in every way. David's quite right, the figures in this report, and we talk about this a lot because this is the challenge with the Pan Dorset report, is that it can take us down rabbit holes. It's the same with the safeguarding report at times. It's not for us to be complacent, but the specific and particular issues in here are for BCP, and that alerts us because we share the partners clearly, so we need to be really mindful around that. But I can absolutely assure you that partners are having those sorts of conversations in our partnership boards too. But we do need to be really respectful to that. We know that nationally it's a huge overrepresentation of our black and minority ethnic young people in the criminal justice system. I'd also just want to put on record, one of the things that I'm raising nationally is a real concern about the numbers of young people, and we only have a very small number, but who are in youth offender institutions and secure training centres at the present time, their ability to have out of room time is really, really diminished at the present time. And David and I have had conversations from the beginning of lockdown of continually focusing upon our individual young people. I'm really concerned about the well-being of the young people in the criminal justice system at the present time. And I know that David keeps that conspicuous care around those young people, but we should be really concerned. It is a really concerning time for those young people. So I just wanted to kind of say that, you know, it's always a time for us to be raising that as a conversation.
Thank you. Andrew, did you want to speak?
Just briefly, if I may, Chair. I have often referred to in the past my uncomfortableness at the number of children in care nationally, which states at about 75,000, and the prison population of Britain, which is about 83,000, and that very close correlation between them. Because when you scratch below the surface of our prison population, you realise that a considerable cohort did spend time in care as a child and young person. If you then factor in their special educational needs, or as we've heard about, say, their requirement for speech therapy and assistance, they are very, very disadvantaged in our criminal justice system, to my mind, and that is why we're seeing a very considerable representation inside our prison system. We understand that that if we want to see a lowering rate of crime, then we have to see a prosperous economy, because we do see in countries which have large-scale economic difficulties, and we will all recall in Spain and after the economic crash, it was the young people who were disproportionately out of meaningful employment. They were unemployed and unengaged, and that was very significant in their life outcomes. And as we emerge out of COVID, we need to be mindful of that. So I will be working very closely with my colleague, Councillor Suttle, on economic development to look at what opportunities we can do to steady the ship in Dorset Council area, to provide economic platforms, particularly for those skilled and learning requirements that will help, effectively reinvigorate some opportunity and meaningful employment for young people who will be disproportionately affected by, unfortunately, a downturn in the economy. And that's what I want to say on those points.
Thank you, Andrew. I now have Councillor Coombs, Tony Coombs.
Thank you, Chairman. I was going to mention that correlation that Andrew just been speaking about, because it's a conversation that he and I have had in the past, and I fully support all his comments about that link. A couple of other points that I wanted to make. When I read the report, there was a lot about child exploitation, but nothing that actually highlighted county lines. And I do understand that county lines can be seen as a form of child exploitation, but in some ways, by not mentioning it, it almost feels as though it's being pushed to one side a little bit. So maybe officers would like to come back on that. And the other comment I wanted to make was around the performance indicators on the first time entrance. And I was just wondering if we're seeing any impact on those numbers due to antisocial behaviour during this current crisis. Certainly it's been a major issue in my ward, where we do have some quite severe ASB going on, which is taking a lot of time and activity from all of the local agencies. And again, I just wondered if there was a comment on that, and someone else must have been listening through telepathy, because I see that the Police and Crime Commissioner has just this morning launched a survey with the public about antisocial behaviour to see what people's experiences are.
Do you want to respond to that, Chair?
Yes, please.
Also, to Councillor Rennie, asked a question about our feedback. I just wanted to answer that as well. So just on that point, the negative feedback well, I would say we do seek feedback. I'm not happy with the rate of returns in terms of the written or the completed online surveys that we use. We also get a lot of feedback in terms of verbal comments during our interactions with young people, families, victims, and to some extent their response to our supervision is a form of feedback. If they keep keeping their appointments, that's a better sign than if they don't. So there are various ways that we take the feedback, and we're very alert to the fact that it's not always positive, and that's perhaps not surprising when you think that their engagement with our service is not voluntary, it's something that they're required to do. County lines, so child exploitation is, I apologise if that wasn't sufficiently clear. My approach to that is child exploitation covers various things. Child criminal exploitation, of which one form would be county lines, and child sexual exploitation being another, as well as other forms like radicalisation. And the county lines, personally, I find that a term of limited usefulness, because unless you know what it means, it's not obvious what it means. Whereas I think child exploitation is a clearer term. And from our point of view, locally, we work with children in Dorset who reside in Dorset, and some of them are drawn into activities associated with county lines. So drug supply originating from organised crime groups out of our area, but using local children to supply the drugs. That would be where we would get most involved with county lines, and as well, some young people from out of our area get arrested locally, are dealt with in police custody, and then returned to their home area. So we might have brief contact with those young people, and we would make sure we share the right information with their home social care and youth offending teams, but it wouldn't be our responsibility to work with those young people. So the child exploitation is a real concern, though, and it links in a way to some of the other points that have just been discussed about the impact of the COVID lockdown. We've talked about education opportunities being difficult for this group, and perhaps now even more difficult because all young people are struggling with their access to education. Antisocial behaviour is a concern. It hasn't yet translated into an increase in first-time entrants. I think a lot of those concerns are being dealt with outside of the justice system. One of my concerns about the lockdown period is that we already had concerns about delays in our youth justice system in terms of the time between an offence taking place and if it's going to court, the first court appearance. And with the courts having been shut for 3 months during the lockdown, those delays are extended. So I'm mentioning that partly because some of the incidents that occurred during the lockdown have not yet reached an outcome, so they're under investigation. Where possible, we're trying to use out-of-court disposals, which is a process that we can operate more quickly, but we have to make sure that is appropriate to the seriousness of the offence, which we do. So as things stand, we haven't seen an increase linked to antisocial behaviour. Crime was significantly down in the tightest period of the lockdown. Arrest rates have restored towards a pre-lockdown level during May and June, I would say.
Thank you.
Any other questions, Tony?
I'm done, thank you.
Stella.
Well, I think first of all, the fact that young offenders, most young offenders have speech, language and communication needs shows the importance of our early intervention in the children and young persons plan that we discussed earlier. We also know that when youngsters are excluded from school, they quite often start offending because they're not getting any guidance at all. I'm very concerned that in September, when schools go back, some youngsters will just not be able to cope at all with the school situation and education. Teachers will be stressed, schools will not have a backup plan. Are we talking to schools about trying to keep these youngsters in school and not excluding them? Because once they're excluded, they start walking the streets and trouble happens.
Yes, Mark Blackman is going to respond.
Yes, good morning. Absolutely, we've been having that conversation for a little while with them. It's going to be hugely challenging for some of our young people adapting back into a very rigid regime in some senses, which is almost completely different in other respects to the experience they've had previously during lockdown and in school previously, because there will be additional guidelines and rules that they need to comply by, and that will be challenging for some children to do so. So we have had that conversation over a longer period of time. We've been working with our head teachers and developing the approaches that might be taken. We are also looking at a more sympathetic view for our families. I think there's some national news around wanting to fine families that don't send children to school, and we would much rather deploy a strength-based resource to talk to families and young people about why children are not in school and to work with them, so that we don't step straight back into a punitive culture. And I think that's going to be the key here. We need to build the relationship base that helps young people to behave. Early help, as we've talked about in terms of speech and language just now, absolutely part of the picture, and we need to make sure that right down to the lowest levels, right down to the youngest children, we are making sure that we are providing for their needs, and we're working with our health colleagues and others in the system to make sure that we're getting ahead of some of those things rather than being in a reactive space.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Are there any other questions? I'm not seeing any other. Oh, I haven't missed anybody off. No. I just wanted to look at the introduction and just ask about risk. There doesn't appear to be anywhere in the report. I mean, there's obviously a lot of risks, but it doesn't seem to be in the plan, the risks to achieving the agreed outcomes. And I just wonder if that should be in here somewhere.
You're right, I haven't included a specific section on risk to the outcomes. I've mentioned in the accompanying report that we recognise that one of the obvious risks is resources, and we know we're operating in a time through the COVID lockdown and the aftermath in terms of the economy that may restrict our resources. Having said that, we have managed our resources effectively through having a Pan-Dorset partnership for this service over the last 5 years, and we feel we have the resilience to continue to meet these priorities even with pressure on our resources.
Right, okay. Are there any more points? Anybody wants to make any further points?
No.
No. Okay, this we need to put a recommendation through to for the Youth Justice Plan, which is going to go to Cabinet and then on to approval at full council. So we have a recommendation here to endorse this, and I would like to ask for a seconder on that, please.
Chairman, I'll second it, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Penfold.
Apologies,
Sorry.
Apologies,
right.
it's Lindsay Watson. Yep. Can I just clarify who the proposer of the recommendation was, please, for the minutes?
Me.
Okay, thank you. And sorry, the seconder was?
Councillor Penfold.
Many thanks.
And can I thank everybody involved with this, and David Webb, and thank you for the comments made by also Councillor Parry as well. Thank you. Right.
Chairman, apologies,
yes.
It's Lindsay. Just once more, we've had a proposer and seconder. Are we just going to do it by kind of just saying, is everybody happy? Just to be clear, so as it's a recommendation
yes.
to Cabinet, please.
Absolutely, yes. I'm not going to ask for a roll call of members, but if you're not happy, could you please express that? Otherwise we can take that as everyone's content. Right? Everyone's happy with that, Lindsay?
Thank
Lindsay?
you, Chair. Yes, thank you, Chairman.
Yeah,
I've noted that for the minutes.
Brilliant, thank you. Members, it is 12:15 nearly, so we've been going for 2 hours. Does anybody wish to have a break, or do you want to crack on? 5-minute break?
Fine, crack on.
Crack on?
Mhm.
Okay. Okay. Right, we shall move on to agenda item 8. How well has Dorset Council responded to meeting the needs of vulnerable groups during lockdown? A review of a report to the Cabinet, which went on the 30th of June. And we have Susan Ward-Rice, who's going to present that report. And we also have Councillor Peter Wharf, who is here as well, who I'm sure will comment. So, Susan, would you like to begin?
Good afternoon, everyone.
Hello,
I'm
Susan. Thank
hello.
you.
I'm Susan Ward-Rice, Diversity and Inclusion Officer. I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Paul, who's just going to open up to give you some background about the report, and then I will come in after that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Paul Iggulden here from Public Health Department. Chair, if I could say a few words about the work that was undertaken, I'll then hand over to Susan, who will give us a little bit more detail on the recommendations. Just to remind the committee that this paper did go to Cabinet at the end of June and was approved. It will be useful to get views from this committee in terms of helping shape the forward work as we move forward with this. So this paper that we have looks at how well did the council and partners respond to meeting the needs of vulnerable groups during the lockdown period. I think it's important to emphasise this was an initial assessment, and indeed the recommendations to the paper notes that we'll be working together to consider and keep a focus on the impacts of the pandemic on vulnerable people in subsequent phases beyond lockdown. So the assessment that we undertook began life with the Community Shield's mental health and safeguarding subgroup, in which there was an action to consider how well vulnerable local residents had been supported during lockdown. And that work began with initial identification of vulnerable groups through a desktop exercise, which was conducted by my colleague Rupert Lloyd. And then that list was refined through discussion with the Community Shield subgroup I mentioned earlier, the mental health and safeguarding subgroup. And then we sort of joined forces, as it were, teamed up with Susan, who had separately commenced some work on an Equalities Impact Assessment. The assessment work we undertook was framed around a template which is reported in the paperwork, and we invited colleagues, partners across the council and across the Community Shield to consider how well different vulnerable groups had been supported in terms of how well they've been informed about the help available, how well we'd responded to their requests for help, and to what extent we've been proactively reaching out to ask them about their ongoing needs. So emphasise there that it's very much at this point a self-assessment, a reflective process that we undertook. And I think going forward in subsequent phases, as we consider how well we support people through next phases of coronavirus pandemic, we would wish to extend the number of people we engage with and the views of different stakeholders, most notably those from the vulnerable groups themselves. And that's a key theme that is included in the actions that were recommended by Cabinet. We believe the initial assessment has given us a very useful start point, and indeed has helped us in terms of shaping the development of the local outbreak management plan. I think I'd like to note that in the course of undertaking this work, as I mentioned earlier, we had a self-assessment from staff and partners. We also engaged with council looking through a roundtable process where we went on a locality basis to meet councillors to discuss and to hear from them the work they have been doing in their local areas in terms of supporting vulnerable people. That was very helpful in terms of enriching the assessment process, and I believe both officers and councillors alike got a lot of insights from that. Over the summer, we're hoping to capture some of those insights and create some case studies to, in effect, celebrate some of the great work that has been done locally. The findings from the assessment fell broadly into three main categories, and Susan will talk to these shortly, but there were three main areas: short-term, immediate kind of actions to address specific issues that were identified. Another category where we had found areas where more information was needed to really understand and assess how well groups have been supported, and then longer term actions about how we might actually engage with those groups to understand their needs and requirements going forward. So that's a little overview of how we undertook the work and the broad level of findings and suggested next steps that have been agreed. I'll hand over to Susan to say a little bit more about that roundtable work with the councillors and a little bit more by way of the recommendations, and then perhaps, Chair, we could open it up for conversation from members of the committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul.
Okay, thank you, Paul. So as Paul mentioned, we undertook a number of virtual roundtable discussions. These took place between May and June. They had sort of two aims. Initially, it was to share our draft equality impact assessment and to get some thoughts and initial feedback on that, but also to understand members' experiences of the impact of COVID-19 on their ward, and which vulnerable groups they were coming across through their work and how these people had been supported. Some of the key themes that emerged from these roundtables sort of very much included about how communities and organisations had responded in supporting vulnerable people within their communities, the impact of lockdown on people's mental well-being, and in particular those who were facing financial hardship and young people, and that came across in sort of all of the sessions, and concern about those who may have benefited from support but didn't because they were hard to reach or had been reluctant to access support for some reasons. And then another concern that came out in all of the sessions was around digital exclusion, and sort of people who weren't accessing services because they were digital. And it was trying to understand why that is, whether it's around choice, cost or skills. Appendix 2 of our report on page 95 gives further details of these roundtable discussions. As Paul said, we moved sort of the action plan of the impact assessment was broken down into 3 categories on page 76. The first category is short-term improvement. So what can the council do immediately and quite quickly? And one of them was about sort of communications and our information. So how accessible is our information going out? And does it meet everyone's needs? So is there a need for us to communicate in alternative formats such as easy read or other languages, or use key organisations to get messages out? We're also very conscious that lots of good work has taken place across Dorset and within our communities, and we're starting to look how we capture some of that work through case studies and share that across Dorset Council area for learning. And as mentioned in sort of the Cabinet on the 30th of June by Councillor Wharf, but also in the report, In the EQIA itself, Black minority ethnic communities are at greater risk of COVID-19, and the recent Public Health England report very much reinforces this. We need to use that research in Dorset Council to look at how we can improve our response to the needs of Black minority ethnic communities in Dorset as well. The second category of the action plan focuses where the council needs more information and to inform how we work in the future as part of our recovery and reset. So we're starting to do some work at the moment with citizens' advice, trying to understand the issues people who are deaf or with hearing and or visual impairments have faced during the lockdown, and to look at those experiences. But we also need to start engaging with a wide range of other communities, including our LGBTQ+ community and people with learning disabilities and learning difficulties, to find out about their experiences. And finally, the third category of the action plan is more long-term and is using the information collected from our actions in the second category to inform future work and inform that recovery and reset work. These actions are a real opportunity for us at Dorset Council to understand more about our local communities and can help us to really build that stronger relationship with our communities and help us to deliver more efficient and effective services in the future. And in addition to the impact assessment, Children's Services have provided some additional information about how they've worked with children and young people and their families during sort of the lockdown period, and this can be found on page 99. We're happy to take any questions.
I don't know if Peter wants to make any comment before Claire, Councillor Sutton speaks.
Very briefly, Councillor Somper, the idea for the roundtable discussions came up at the Diversity and Inclusion EAP. I'm particularly pleased at the work of Paul and Rupert from Public Health, who worked very closely with Susan and did an excellent job. It was described in some detail at Cabinet. I think one of the interesting things is that the individual groups that were analysed had different takes on their concerns, and it wasn't one size fits all. And whilst that may seem very obvious, it's actually quite important to recognise that there will be different solutions and resolutions according to the areas and according to the composition of the population, etc. But I think they've done an excellent work, and it was a really good example of partnership working. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Wolf. Claire Sutton, did you want to speak?
Thank you, Jane.
I know you've got to go off in a minute.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, just really quickly, obviously this is very comprehensive, but it strikes me that quite a lot of it is generic, is quite generic, you know, that certain groups are going to have quite similar experiences, you know, whether they live in Dorset or in Staffordshire or whatever. So, I mean, this might not be a very popular thing to say, and I really appreciate your enthusiasm for this subject, Peter, but I wonder if further analysis at this level of detail might not be the best use of internal resources, because, you know, I'm not sure in some areas how much more we have to learn. The big point I would make is that the generic point is what we know for sure is whatever your protected characteristic, you know, whether it's age, ethnicity, sexual orientation, whatever, we know that the impact will be exacerbated by poverty or income insecurity. That's across the piece, you know, whatever your issues. So locally, I think for me the big thing, and no one will be surprised to hear me say this, is reassurance of our collective determination that existing inequalities are not further reinforced across Dorset. Thanks.
Peter, do you want to comment?
Very briefly, I absolutely take the point that we need to not have a completely generic response, but we'd be failing to do our duty if we didn't drill down to a fairly large level of detail. So we will be very aware that we need to try and think slightly outside the box and not just do some process that doesn't actually use any intellect. So Claire, you're not wrong, but part of me says we have to do it anyway, because if we didn't, boy, would I be in trouble if it identified something. Thank you.
Thank you. Are you off now, Claire? Thank you. Molly?
Yes, thanks.
Councillor Rennie?
Bye. Thank you very much, Peter. We wouldn't definitely not want you to get in trouble for not doing it.
No.
Yes, it is it is very useful. And you, again, to use Claire's words, you won't be surprised to hear me say this. Domestic abuse is not a protected characteristic. Domestic abuse is not anywhere on anybody's list, but every one of those groups that you're talking about there will have experience of it within their groups. Everything we have talked about domestic abuse will be part of the causation of what we've talked about today, and the outcomes to all our families and the children are horrendous. But during the lockdown, people couldn't come to us and couldn't come for help. And more people were living with this situation. And interestingly, I went to a conference organised by the lottery during this lockdown, which took account of the West Country. And we heard from various providers and one large council area in Manchester about how they'd been dealing with this. And the common theme through everything was the number of the client group that had left a service, be it a commissioned service or a non-commissioned service, who returned for help during the crisis because the perpetrator had found their way back into the home for all sorts of devious reasons. But all of those people, I should imagine as a council, were not expecting. And if we have another spike, that will happen again. And the number of people who contacted me directly as telling me this, who needed help, who didn't have a social worker, didn't have somebody who could direct them to help and to food and to various places. It was incredible. And I think that this is the biggest issue around domestic abuse, and it's this hidden crime that is going on to not just I hate the word victim, but all the children. And we talked about this with the babies being born, the families that maybe were protecting and supporting those victims, they were not able to go and do that protection either. There was nowhere for them to go. And I am worried about if we have a spike that will just blow out of all proportion. And somehow I'd like domestic abuse to get on our not protected characteristics, because it can't be, it's not legal, but somewhere else, and do some work around how we can find these people, because we know they're there and we have a duty to do something about it now. We are doing it, sorry, now was the wrong word, but we know they are going to be there even greater when we have this spike again. And Teresa actually talked about a global lockdown. You know, we don't know what's coming around the corner. And I don't apologize for it, because I know I'm boring about it, but somebody has to be. Thank you.
Molly, you're right, and also within that group are older people, older vulnerable people, perhaps people with dementia, who are living with their partners, who have found this whole process hugely pressurizing, extremely stressful, and you know, there may be issues around abuses there as well. So yes, you're right, children and families, absolutely, but there are also the other age spectrum as well, which we need to be extremely mindful of too. So let's not forget them. I think
I never have.
no, I know you haven't, but I just in my ward I have a slightly perhaps older population than you do in yours, and I'm very aware of these issues. I think Susan Ward-Rice, you were going to speak, and Paul, you wanted to speak on those comments.
Just to respond to Councillor Rennie's comments, the impact assessment is very much sort of a constantly being updated document, so we can add to the action plan to look at that sort of issue around domestic abuse and sort of pick up some of those concerns that you may have. That's not a problem. That's sort of the idea of the impact assessment, is that it's constantly evolving, and there is new stuff that's going to come in. And new concerns. So as a part of an action from this committee, we can add that to the action plan to start looking at that work, and to start looking at how we respond to domestic abuse through COVID and then in the way forward as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. I mean, when this was first, this document first came to light from Councillor Wharf, he did say very much that this was an evolving document and it would be continuing to evolve as we move through the pandemic and towards coming out, hopefully, and then beyond that. Paul, did you want to speak?
Thank you, Chair. I did, but I think the point I was going to make was really covered by Susan. Thank you, Susan.
Thank you. Can I also say that the round tables that were had, and I participated, we all participated, were, I found, extremely useful and helpful in the one I participated in. And I was also glad, Susan, you mentioned earlier people who were partially sighted and blind. So I believe there's around 2,000 people registered blind, but it's actually estimated, I've spoken to a few people around this, including the Dorset Blind Association, that they estimate that there's a number of living with sight loss, partially sighted, who've not been yet diagnosed or put into any category or group, around 17,500 potentially.
Gosh,
which is, you know, huge. A lot of people with visual impairments, and that feeds into the communication element of how we've been communicating, and whether that's sufficient for those people, and that feeds into those who are digitally aware, active, want to be, don't want to be, or whatever. We sent out that one newsletter. I'm not going to go over it because I know it's been spoken about before, and that there's I believe an EAP for comms being set up, who'll probably be looking exactly at that very point.
That's good to know, actually. Yeah, and I think for us it's also about working with organisations like Dorset Blind Association in terms of looking at how we get messages out, and the survey work that we're doing with the Citizens Advice at the moment is sort of going to be doing is contacting them, but also working through other organisations as well. So
I think it's really important. I know we talked, and Age UK did a huge amount. I know, a huge amount. But talking directly to those specific groups, I think is really should be an important part. So I have Jill, Councillor Taylor, followed by Councillor Tony Coombs.
Thank you, and thank you very much for this report. It's a really good report, and I think basically sums up what we did and where we are. I've just got a couple of questions. One thing I'd like to reiterate what you said in your introduction about the amount of residents who haven't got digital communications. We found that absolutely amazing, the incredible amount who came to us during COVID because they weren't online, they weren't getting information, and they were having real problems because of it. Just something I would like to talk about. I'm back on my pet one of today, which is about resourcing. When this paper went to Cabinet, it actually noted that the actions set out in 5 would need appropriate resourcing and oversight. And I think this committee is well placed to do the oversight part of it. But I'm just wondering about resourcing. Do you need any more resourcing because none was allocated? And if so, should this be going back to Cabinet for additional resourcing? Thank you.
Sorry, Chair, can I speak to that?
Sorry, I just had to mute. I think it was a helicopter flying over.
In terms of resourcing, I think there is a line back to the Community Shield, and there's some consideration within the structure that we have in place around the Community Shield in terms of how we take forward some of this work. And there are some questions still there to be addressed, I think.
Okay, so how much of this work can you take forward without any resourcing? Because there was, I think Susan said something that you're starting to do some of the work, but certainly in the first part of the actions.
I can see Claire's keen to come in. I think it's important that we try and make some of these actions part of business as usual. And one of the great advantages, I think, of doing this piece of work has been to help us all reflect and hold a mirror up to what we're doing and remind us of the importance of being kind to each other and looking at and acknowledging variation across society. So some of it we really would want to try and weave into what people do as part of their day-to-day work. Question mark, I think we might have some residual where we might need to put extra effort in as well, but we haven't got to the detail of that yet.
Thank you.
Chairman, it's Lindsay. Just need to unmute your microphone, please.
Thank you. Claire, did you want to come in?
Yes, please. I'm just responding as I chair the multi-agency Community Shield programme, and this piece of work originated there, and we have a series of subgroups across the partnership set up to be able to respond and address the particular issues that we have identified and how we will work together to address some of them. So we have a strong group of community sector partners working together, including Dorset Race Equality, including Citizens Advice, including Age UK and others, where we're looking at our collective resources and how we might want to deploy them to some of the emerging issues that have been raised. We've also joined up with our colleagues from the CCG and across the health system to think about how we're collectively going to respond to some of the emerging issues that have been identified within this as well. So as Paul said, I think some of this will be about how we work together in our reset and our recovery mode and use our resources for that. And some of this will also be about how we work more closely with our community and voluntary sector and to build upon the work that we've done through being more neighbourly, the mutual aid groups and the good work that they've been doing going forward as well. So I think a lot of learning from us around identifying who the most vulnerable are, thinking about those mitigations and then thinking about how our new services as we re-emerge from lockdown need to look and reach those who need us most, and also in some different ways. So a lot of learning taken forward and is already starting to be fed into those plans, and the Community Shield group will hold the baton on making sure that we continue to deliver on this.
Thank you, Claire. Councillor Coombs.
Thank you, Chairman. There's 2 or 3 points I wanted to pick up from the discussion and the report. The first point in some ways links back to the other reports we've seen this morning, and that's about the increase of antisocial behaviour of young people, both those that initiate it and those that get caught up in it because of the other support that isn't around them at the moment. So that's just a concern that I would like to see perhaps reflected a little bit more in the action plan. The There was also a comment about the number of referrals being made for free school meals. I would certainly hope that local voluntary support groups are put in touch with these people, or the other way around, I should say, so that we can provide local support where we have capacity. And also the comments about older people and domestic violence. Although we thankfully haven't seen domestic violence amongst elderly couples where one partner has dementia, we've certainly seen a big increase in the lack of ability to cope. Because if you're stuck with one person 24 hours a day and you've got failing health, you know, I've got an elderly gentleman who I've probably known for 20 years in the town, and every time you speak to him he just bursts into tears because of the advanced stage of his wife's dementia and the fact that he literally just cannot cope 24 hours a day. And that and one or two other cases we have made referrals through to adult social services, and can I thank the team for the work they've done with those people. It has made a huge difference. And my final comment is on the appendix of the meetings with members, the round table. In top of page 96, the first bullet point mentions concern and frustration were voiced over the interaction between Age UK, Dorset Volunteer Centre and a local community group delivering food by members in one ward, but with positive experiences identified in others. I have to say I do find that comment a little bit light, because it wasn't just one ward. There were several wards in the east that had major concerns, which have since been resolved, about the lack of information coming to the local community support groups from Age UK and the Volunteer Centre. So I think some of the issues, I picked up that one instance, but I think in general, a lot of the unease in the local areas has been played down in this report. It only sort of says, oh, he says this odd occasion here and this odd occasion over here, but it was a lot more than that. Although I do think things have improved since then. Thank you.
Just touching, if I may, Tony, on the point of more elderly people. I think one of the problems that I encountered and others have encountered was they were also fearful about COVID-19 itself, and part of their hesitation and lack of finding help they needed was their very grave concerns about catching it as well. So there was a sort of double element to that pressure to them, which is fully understandable.
Can I come back on that point very quickly?
Yes, Tony.
Because this particular instance that I referred to a moment ago, the gentleman concerned was really worried about his wife being taken into residential care, because of the risk and what had been said nationally, but also the fact that if he did that, he was convinced he'd never see his wife again.
Yeah, huge fears around that.
Really, really
huge
difficult.
Fears, very difficult. Vivian, did you want to come in?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I just wanted to respond to that about some of, and I'm sure Jill may want to come in after me in terms of the wellbeing group that she's leading as a result of the COVID response. But I think it's fair to say that we have had a number of carers, particularly caring for people with dementia, as the weeks have gone on, that have expressed their levels of concerns, and also there have been incidents of domestic abuse because of the confined ways that people have had to live. And I think you're absolutely right that some of the work that would have normally gone on with people to support them wasn't able to happen because people didn't want to think about any respite or any support going into care homes because of the fear of how people may well be treated or may never be able to see their relatives, etc., etc., as we all know. So a lot of our work going forward absolutely has to be to sort of making sure that we are hearing the voices of carers and also mindful of the fact of those people that have dementia themselves, and that we're safeguarding those individuals, because I think we're all very well aware that COVID has had a massive response in terms of impact on people who are caring for people in their own homes and not felt able to ask for support and help for a variety of reasons. So that is the work that we're undertaking in adult services with our partners to identify those people. But, you know, we absolutely would want to assure you that we are cognizant of the fact of this is an emerging picture, and I think we will see more of this, and that's what ourselves and our partners are preparing for, because this, as COVID begins to lockdown releases people, we are seeing an emerging picture happen, but we have got good support going into those people that we are aware of.
Exactly, and as the reports, this is an evolving document, and as we move forward, we will begin to see areas that perhaps we weren't aware of. I mean, I think we are all aware of what we think they're going to be, but actually finding these situations is going to be another thing altogether. So thank you for that.
Likewise, Jane, in terms of, sorry to interrupt you, in terms of people's fragile mental health, and that is an emerging picture as well. So we're very cognizant of working together on how that's emerging. Thank you.
Yes. Are there any other comments?
No. Yes, if I could say, Chair, thank you. I wanted to respond. Sorry, it's Jill Vickers. I did.
Ah, sorry, Jill.
To put my hand up. Yes, I just wanted to respond to a couple of things, really. The first was the bit about people caring for people with dementia, and we've definitely seen a rise in carer stress. What we have been doing is creating safe places within our day centres for people with dementia, specifically to support the carers that are really struggling. So that was one thing I just wanted to pick up on. The other one is Vivian mentioned the wellbeing group, which is a merger of the mental health and safeguarding subgroup for shielding and the health patient shielding subgroup. And what we're doing within that group is using the Dorset information and intelligence system to identify those people who are most at risk, either of domestic abuse or vulnerability, all of the range of people really with either complex needs or less complex needs, but more stress, so mental health, anxiety and so on, so that we can actually target some of our interventions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, that's good to hear. And not surprising. Does anybody else want to make any comments on this report? Councillor Wharf, did you want to make any further comment?
Thank you, Chairman. I have nothing further to add. It's all been very adequately explained, and I take the points and will ensure that they're actioned.
Thank you. And can I also thank the author of the additional information from Children's Services as well. I think it was a bit short notice, but thank you for adding that in. I don't think there's anything else to add. I mean, it is ongoing and it's going to keep on going, and this report will be coming back and be seen at further committees, be it this one and I'm sure it will be going to Cabinet again as it moves and as actions start to come out of these issues that we're seeing emerging. So if there's no further points on that, the recommendations are there, and I think we'll stick with those. I don't think there's anything else to add on that agenda item, which means we can move on. And where is my list? We're moving on to agenda item 9. It is 9, isn't it, Lindsay? I've lost my list.
Yes.
It's under
Yes,
my
Chair,
notepad.
I've
got it. I've got it. It was under my notepad. It's fine. I often find things under my notepad. Right. Everybody okay? Now we move on to item 9. This is the forward plan, which doesn't have any dates on it. Lindsay, do you want to comment on this, please, for members?
Oh, okay, Chairman.
Thank you, Susan.
This is a sort of a position statement as to where we are as of today with the work for the People Scrutiny Committee. Obviously, members will be aware that we've had a governance review, and from September there will be new scrutiny and overview committees. If I could just leave it on that page, that's lovely, thank you. The People Scrutiny Committee from September is going to be merged with the current work plan for the Health Scrutiny Committee, and then they're going to be separated out into scrutiny items and overview items. So for the purpose of today, this is a position statement to show you where we are with items, where things were scheduled into your work programme to come at specific points. The month has been left in, but we need to do some work on bringing those new work plans together. So page 101 and 102 show items that were coming up in the forthcoming months that you had already put on your work programme. Moving forwards, if we can go to page 103, please. So page 103 shows items that should have come to your April meetings and July meetings, which needed to be postponed because of COVID-19. I've left them on there so that we don't lose sight of them. But obviously they're going to be for the new committees to schedule into their work programmes as relevant, but they sit on that work programme. I think there were comments earlier about an Ofsted item and the transition from children's to adults, and you will see that those items sit on that list to be rescheduled into the work programme. If you can just move forward to page 104, please. Page 104 sets out some items that they're either annual items, so they need to be put into committee work programme on an annual basis moving forward, or they are items that were identified by the committee previously but have yet to actually been scheduled in for a particular time. But again, they sit there so they don't get lost for the new committees to review and schedule in as appropriate. And I think page 104 was the last page. So hopefully that's clear. There's a piece of work that needs to be done to bring the committee forward plans together, and there needs to be some discussion with the chairman of those committees and obviously the members of those committees when they are formed in September. So I think that's probably all I'll say on it at the moment. It's an opportunity for members to take stock of where we are with things and to make sure that things that you've identified previously do sit on that work programme so they can be scheduled in the future work programmes. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Teresa, you wanted to speak.
Thank you. We can certainly do some work outside of the meeting on the forward plan, but I just wanted really to alert people. I think we would change the youth club issue into the EAP linkage because it's that broader youth offer. I think we would also want to, as I've said previously, change the transitions into more of a kind of preparation and for adulthood and work for all agenda item. And then we do have a process which it may be useful just to think about when's the right time to bring that forward. So we undertake a self-evaluation of children's services, which goes to peer review at a regional level in December. So we'll complete that, and that's part of our Ofsted process. So you'll all be getting very familiar with the timeline for Ofsted, which is that we have an annual conversation every year where we go through our self-evaluation framework. The actual meeting for that isn't until March, but we served the self-evaluation before then in December. I think we'll have had another visit from Ofsted before then. I think that whilst they're turning back on short visits in September. I think a number of local authorities will have a short visit. We'll probably do a full inspection, as you all know, but I don't think they're going to be able to do that with the COVID interruption. So it's just around whether we can put that in instead of, I think probably if we look back to the previous Ofsted inspection, it's not going to be as meaningful as looking at the self-evaluation that we could share with you, and that would be more meaningful.
Members? Thank you, Teresa.
Chairman, it's Lindsay. Can I just make one sort of procedural point? We're obviously coming up to 1 o'clock. The Constitution states that if we want to go beyond 3 hours, we need to take a vote on it. So I'm not quite sure how soon we are off finishing, but we've got 2 minutes before we just need to take a vote in order to continue the meeting beyond the 3-hour point.
I don't think we'll go on much beyond that, so I'm happy to propose that. And if members present are happy with that, we continue. I don't think we'll be too much longer. Can you indicate?
Chairman. Yes, fine.
Okay. Yes, that's a yes from Molly. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Stella.
Yes.
Maria. Oh no, Maria's gone. And Jill. Okay. Jill. Yes. Okay. Everyone's happy to continue. Thank you for that. Is it really 3 hours? Gosh. Right. Lindsay, you're muted.
Yeah, sorry, Chairman, I'm not sure there's much more for me to add. I say it's for members to just take stock where we are with the plan and just make sure they're happy that everything that has been brought up today is included to take forward to the new committees.
Yes, so I know, Jill, you spoke about, was it Jill, about Ofsted and access to secondary schools? You were concerned about that. Was it Jill who said that at the beginning of the meeting?
Yes, it was.
Was it?
Chairman.
It was.
I was just slightly concerned that I was expecting a report to be on these, not particularly for us to discuss, but just an update report, particularly around the Ofsted, which came from, I think it was a meeting that we had in October.
Yeah.
You know, I was just slightly disappointed. I know we've all been busy, but we're now, what, the end of July, which is 3 months after the date we were expecting it. It was just a comment.
Yes, Councillor Parry.
Chairman, I could take some political responsibility here. If a report to your committee has been omitted to be submitted, I am genuinely sorry and my apologies for that. Councillor Taylor is quite right to bring it to our attention, and we will ensure that a summary report is available for a committee meeting of your choosing at a future date.
Thank you.
Right. I don't know if anybody else has got any comments, and there'll be new things added as the makeup of the committee takes shape. One of the areas that I had felt very strongly about, and I think other members will remember, is housing associations and having them come to scrutiny. We did have some meetings set up, but unfortunately they had to be postponed. So I would hope that those meetings can still take place in some form or other. There was discussion around whether they'd happen on one day or over 2 days or 2 half days or whatever. The format of them is important, but the important element is making sure that they come.
Yes.
Are there any other comments or any other suggestions, or we're happy for it as is and for it to evolve as the committee takes shape?
Yes.
Right. Well, if there's nothing else to add, then I shall close the meeting.